Chapter 1031. Oh, so tough. Looking at Balian Madan, the mixed blood walked over with a look of disdain. He took off his sunglasses, and a pair of humorous triangular eyes appeared in front of Zhang Hai. Looking at the triangular eyes, Zhang Hai couldn't find any other adjectives other than Where did he get the confidence to take off his sunglasses? Oh, so what if I'm tough? Do you still want another round? Is it you, or is it your junk? Balian Madan glanced at the man with disdain and said with a look of disdain. He didn't see that this Balian Madan was not a good person either. Hey, let's have another round. Wait until the end of today. After nodding at Balian Madan with his finger, the man walked back with a smile and went back to watching the game. Zhang Hai frowned. He wasn't here to stand up for others or to fight. Although he wasn't afraid of anyone, he didn't need to be someone else's gun. If this Balian Madan was such a person, let alone 20%, even if it was 25%, he wouldn't let him represent him. This was because this guy would cause trouble for him. Mr. Zhang, don't worry, this guy is called Terrell King. He is the son of a director of the red wine distribution company I used to work for. This is Paris, he won't dare to mess around. Besides, I'm quite confident in my bodyguard. Balian Madan saw Zhang Hai frown and couldn't help but explain with a smile. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai's frown loosened a little. As long as it had nothing to do with him, he didn't mind watching a good show. After hearing his words, Azalina and the others also noticed Balian Madan's chauffeur and bodyguard. Wallace Shelley thought for a moment, put on her glasses, and quietly scanned the person. Then, she used the microcomputer in her makeup box to check the person's situation while pretending to touch up her makeup. In less than 3 minutes, she had already investigated the situation of this person, and then Azalina whispered in Zhang Hai's ear. Balian Madan's bodyguard was called John Vic. He was originally a member of the French Foreign Corps. He left the team at the age of 25 and fought in the underground world of Europe. He even worked as an assassin, but his rate of accepting missions was very low. He had some reputation in the underground boxing world, but in the Secret Service world, he. According to Azalina, if they fought in the ring, she might not be his opponent. But if they fought now, she could kill him 100 times before he could react. There was no need to worry about such a person. He could be a bodyguard, but he could not threaten Zhang Hai. Moreover, if they fought in the ring, Knerson Peters was not afraid of anyone. After confirming that there was no problem with his safety, Zhang Hai continued to watch the game with Balian Madan. Of course they could also bet. European bookmakers dared to bet almost all kinds of bets. Not only in sports but also in which city hosted the Olympic Games, the World Cup and so on. They also dared to bet on which country's regime changed. Of course they only bet on some countries in the United States and Europe. Domestically, Zhang Hai did not know anything. For a competition like this, there would naturally be people who would place bets. However, the bets here were more for fun than to become rich. Therefore, the highest amount of bets that could be placed was only 500 euros. The odds were from 0, 1 to 3. That was to say, no matter how much they lost, they would only lose 500 euros. After deducting the principal, they would only lose 1,500 euros. They could afford to lose 3 purple tickets, not to mention that there was no chance of getting 3 times the odds. Basically, the odds were between 0, 7 to 1, 2. People who gambled were always the most profitable. They would not lose money. After 3 or 4 rounds, a waiter knocked on the door. After getting permission to enter, he came in and asked Zhang Hai if he wanted to personally participate in a round. Here, he had to sign up the name list. Balian Madan naturally didn't care about this and directly asked his bodyguard and driver to sign up. But just as he took the iPad from the other party's hand and saw the other party's information, the bodyguard's face changed instantly. What's wrong? Balian Madan was a master of reading people's faces. When he saw his bodyguard, he couldn't help but ask. This person. I can't beat him. Hearing his employer's words, the man named John Vic said helplessly. You haven't even fought yet, and you already know that you can't beat him? Hearing his words, Balian Madan's face sank. Then he walked over quickly and looked at the person who had already signed up. He couldn't help but frown when he saw this person. This was because this person was not Terrell King's subordinate that he was familiar with. Instead, he was a South Korean called Park Tae-min. He was one 87 meters tall, 190 pounds, and 31 years old this year. He had no impression of this person. What was going on? This man is the master of my underground boxing, and it is because of him that I ended my underground boxing career. So I'm sorry, Mr. Madan, my duty is to protect your arrangements, not to fight with an enemy that I can't defeat. If you are dissatisfied with me, you can dismiss me at any time. Looking at Balian Madan's face, John Vic also said helplessly on the other side. Balian Madan seems to be a very good employer to him. Although he is not particularly generous, the money he should give will not be small. He has also played many games for Balian here. After every game, all the bonuses and money earned will be his, and he will even give him a sum of money alone. So when John Vic heard that he was going to fight, he did not have any dissatisfaction. Instead, he was a little eager to give it a try, but now it seems that the other party has studied his situation. I'm sorry, Mr. Jiang. I've embarrassed myself in front of you. I'm going to deal with this matter now. Hearing that John Vic would rather be dismissed than fight, Balian Madan knew that he had made up his mind. But even if he wants to be dismissed, he has to go back and talk about it. But now, he has to go to Terrell Madan. Tonight's game is going to be cancelled. Although he will be laughed at, Jiang Hai's hundreds of millions of dollars business must not be delayed. He could see from Jiang Hai's eyes just now that Jiang Hai hates being implicated, and hates being made a fool of by others. Originally, he just wanted to show off his skills, but now he has to settle this matter so that Jiang Hai can rest assured. Wait a minute, the South Pole. But just as he was about to go out, Jiang Hai stood up and waved his hand gently. Then he walked to the information and looked at the person's situation. Originally, Jiang Hai was just like what he thought. He didn't want to cause trouble, but after learning that the other party was from the South Pole, he became interested. It must be known that the Huaxia people hated the Japanese the most, followed by the South Pole. If the other party also found a Frenchman, or an Englishman, or even an American, German, Soviet, Russian, Indian, etc., to show off, then Jiang Hai would just let him deal with it. But the South Pole, it should be quite fun to fight with them. Of course, it's not that he wants to fight by himself. Even if he wants to do so, Azalina and the others will definitely not allow Jiang Hai to do so, because even if there is only a 0.0001% chance that the other party will hurt Jiang Hai, they will not allow it. But just now, Jiang Hai saw that Knerson Peters was eager to have a try, so it doesn't matter if he let him play. Knerson Peters, are you interested in going down to play? Looking at Knerson Peters, Jiang Hai asked indifferently. Of course, no problem. Yes, whether in the eyes of Jiang Hai or in the eyes of Knerson Peters, going down to play the game is just playing. It is far from what he has played before. Okay, then tell me his name, Knerson Peters. Hearing Knerson Peters' words, Jiang Hai also chuckled, and then reported to the waiter next to him. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the waiter immediately wrote it down. As for Knerson Peters, he gently moved his hands and feet. Although he had not played underground boxing for a while, he had not been idle. Usually, he played with Harriman Fells and Bell Lester. Sometimes, Jiang Hai would also come up to play. In the state of playing without killing, Jiang Hai was naturally the strongest, but he was also the second strongest. Of course, if it was a competition of marksmanship, then he was the weakest, but when it came to fighting, he was still quite confident. Originally, his body was abnormally strong, plus eating beef and fish in the manner and absorbing a lot of aura. Now, Knerson Peters was an out-and-out humanoid behemoth. After confirming that Knerson Peters would participate in the game, the waiter here also left. After a while, he brought a set of sportswear, which was prepared for Knerson Peters later. He could not let Knerson Peters wear a casual suit to play the game. After all, France was the fashion capital. They knew very well how much the suit on him was worth. Jiang Hai was very good to his subordinates, especially outside. It was inevitable that handmade suits were from luxury brands. This was also a reflection of strength. While Knerson Peters was changing, in another box far away, a Southern Caucasian had already changed and was looking at the information of his opponent. It's not John Vic, but it doesn't matter. No matter who it is, they can't stop me. Chapter 1032. At this time, there were a total of 7 people sitting in Pu Taimin's room. The person sitting in the main seat was naturally Pu Taimin, who was going to fight today. Park Tae-min was 31 years old this year. He was of Korean descent in the United States. He had joined the United States Army in the early days and had almost become colleagues with Bell. They had entered the Triangle State, but unfortunately, he was afraid of death on the battlefield and had escaped by himself. He had led their team to be completely wiped out and the mission had failed. After the mission had failed, the United States Army had been looking for him, and he had quietly fled to Europe. There, he started to fight in the underground with the foundation of Taekwondo that he had practiced since he was a child. However, if Hwa Sea's Kung Fu was 80% acting and 20% fighting, then South Korea's Taekwondo was 90% or even 100% acting. As the old saying goes, hands are two doors, and you have to rely on your feet to beat people. Taekwondo took this saying to the extreme. Taekwondo had no fist techniques at all. Their two hands were just decorations. As for the leg techniques, to be honest, other than looking good, there were no special skills. There were no high leg sweeps, chain kicks in the air, super chop, and so on. When fighting against amateurs, it was very intimidating. It looked fierce and fierce. However, in the eyes of a real master, these movements were only flaws. When he had just arrived in Europe, he had been beaten up badly by the underground boxing. Later, he pretended to be a Japanese and went to a dojo for Kyokushin karate. After learning Kyokushin karate there, he used this excuse to learn Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Relying on the physical foundation that he had trained in Taekwondo, his fighting power began to improve. Although Taekwondo did not have much fighting power, it still had the effect of strengthening the body. John Vick was someone he met after he learned Brazilian jiu-jitsu. John Vick was indeed his master and had taught him before. However, he had never taught him the real core of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Even so, John Vick had made a name for himself in the underground boxing world. When John Vick was at his peak, he came out. An unknown South Korean fighter defeated John Vick, who was at his peak. Not only did he make a lot of money, but he also made a name for himself. Later, he switched to being a semi-professional. Now, he had quite a reputation. In South Korea and Europe, he had 4 dojos dedicated to teaching students. It was precisely because he had suffered a few losses at the hands of John Vick that this time, after Terrell King learned of his situation, he found him and offered him a large sum of money to invite him over. For people like Terrell King, money and face were more important than the latter. This person looks familiar, and he seems to be very strong. Looking at Pu Tae-min's indifferent look, the other people in the room also came over and looked at the information in his hand. Then a female voice said with some doubts. At this time, in Pu Tae-min's room, there were a total of 7 people including him. 1 was his coach, 1 was his driver, and 2 were his girlfriends. In addition to these 4 people, there were 2 other people. They were none other than Han Jaron and her husband, Yen Zhengxuan, who had some relationship with Zhang Hai. Looking at this information, she felt that Knerson Peters was somewhat familiar. Hey, it doesn't matter. No matter how strong he is, how can he be stronger than Tae-min? Don't joke around. Don't you know how strong Tae-min is? Hearing her words, Yen Zhengxuan on the other side also said with a smile, and at the same time, he also flattered Pu Tae-min. When Yen Zhengxuan was in South Korea, he often played with some famous young masters, which could be regarded as emotional investment. Kickboxing was a very popular event in South Korea. There were many people who fought in the UFC there, and they were also considered stars. They often participated in some reality shows, such as Kim Dong-hsien, Choi Hong-won, Cho Chung-xuan, and so on. Therefore, these young masters often played with these kickboxing masters. As a master in the European underground boxing world, Pu Tae-min naturally had a considerable status in South Korea, so Yen Zhengxuan also had some friendship with him. This time, when he came to France, he occasionally heard Pu Tae-min mention that he had a dojo in France. Originally, he wanted to go and see it, but he happened to be in France, so he invited them to come and watch the competition in the evening. After all, this celebrity couple was also quite famous in South Korea. It was understandable that Pu Tae-min had a good relationship with them, but when he looked at Han Jaron, his eyes were shining. In South Korea, the view of beauty was extremely different from that of China. In South Korea, the highest goddess was Kim Tae-shi, but her reputation in China was really not very big. Next were Han Jaron and Sun Yizhen. Although Song Huiqiao had many supporters, because there were too many rumors about her private life, she gave the public a feeling of dislike. Kwon Jishin herself was a very introverted person, So these two actors who had a great reputation in China were not obvious in South Korea. On the contrary, they were not famous in China, but they were very famous in South Korea. Cough, Taemin. Maybe he felt Pu Taemin's gaze. Yen Zhengxuan suddenly regretted bringing his wife here. Originally, he just wanted to show off his connections in front of Han Jiaren. He didn't want to send a sheep to the tiger's den. Oh, brother Zhengxuan, it's almost time. I have to go and prepare. Hearing Yen Zhengxuan's words, Pu Taemin was too embarrassed to be too obvious, so he just smiled, then went downstairs to prepare. There is something wrong with your friend. After watching Pu Taemin leave, Han Jiaren glanced at Yen Zhengxuan and whispered. Yen Zhengxuan could only smile awkwardly because he also felt that this situation was not right. But now, even if they felt that something was wrong, they couldn't leave. They could only pray that he was just watching. Soon, the host on the ring announced that tonight's competition was over. Next was the time for the private fights. The first round was Pu Taemin against Knerson Peters. These private fights could also raise the stakes, but in order to avoid underground fighting, these private fights would reveal the person behind the other party. This way, if they lost, underground fighting was one thing, but their face was another. There were not many big companies whose face was not worth tens of thousands of euros. Although it was a bet between Balian Madan and Terrell King, Knerson Peters carried the name of Zhang Hai. Next, we will first introduce the fighter under Mr. Terrell King, from the legend of South Korea and Europe's underground fighting world, Pu Taemin. After confirming that there was no problem with both of them, the host also shouted with ambition to arouse the audience's emotions. Many of the spectators who came here were paying attention to black boxing. Although they couldn't say that Pu Taemin's name was well known, they still knew a thing or two about him. For a while, there were a lot of cheers and discussions coming over. Yeah, long live South Korea. Pu Taemin is the first. Under the attention of everyone, Pu Taemin also walked out with his own music. As soon as he walked out, the atmosphere of the audience on the field became even more uplifting. Zhang Hai, who was sitting on the balcony, looked at this person's movements and couldn't help but smile softly. This guy's performance was so stupid. Mr. Zhang, this time it's my fault. You really don't have to get involved in this mess. Looking at Zhang Hai's relish, Balian Madan couldn't help but sigh. This time, he had really exhausted all his tricks. Let's pretend that today's incident didn't happen. We'll talk about other things at the negotiating table tomorrow. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but smile. He was not the kind of person who always tried to be nice. Whether this person lost face, lost money, and even whether he would be killed had nothing to do with Zhang Hai. He just wanted Knerson Peters to slap South Korea's face, that was all. And now looking at South Korea's arrogant attitude, Zhang Hai felt that his decision was really right. After South Korea's cockiness on the stage for almost 5 minutes, it was Knerson Peters' turn to appear. However, compared to the South Stick, his entrance was much calmer. In fact, he was the only one who walked out calmly. The next contestant from the blue team is Mr. Zhang Hai's fighter, Conrad Peters. Looking at Knerson Peters walking over, the host here also looked a little weak. Although it seems that Knerson Peters is much bigger than Pu Taemin, in this ring, there are many cases of big people being knocked down by small people. Because joint skills are allowed here, not simple boxing. Being bigger may not be of much use at this time. Seeing Knerson Peters walk into the ring, the whispers in the audience became louder. Everyone didn't know which side to bet on. Bet 500 euros for me, Knerson Peters. Looking at the indifferent Connor's Zhang Hai said with a smile. Then, I will also bet 500 euros. In a sense, Zhang Hai is also standing up for himself. Naturally, Balian Madan will not miss this opportunity to express goodwill, but Zhang Hai didn't care about his move. Okay, the bet is over. About 3 minutes later, the host received the message that it was almost time and was about to announce the start, but at this time, Zhang Hai in the second floor box suddenly stood up and shouted at the field. Connor's son. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, everyone looked at Zhang Hai. They wanted to see what this person was going to say. Since you bear my name, then let's have a good fight here. Ignoring everyone's eyes, Zhang Hai looked at Knerson Peters standing there and said loudly. After hearing Zhang Hai's words, Knerson Peters also grinned and looked at Pu Taemin with only pity. Chapter 1033. The first round start. After the introduction of both sides, the referee stretched out his hand and said directly to the two men. After hearing the referee's words, Pu Taemin did not immediately come up to fist bump. Instead, he stood in place and did a very famous continuous kick in Taekwondo. The extremely fast speed and the handsome movements naturally caused many women to scream. Listening to these screams, Pu Taemin also smiled. 20 seconds is enough to deal with you. Looking at Knerson Peters, Pu Taemin said with an arrogant face. Hearing his words, Knerson Peters just looked at him calmly. He felt that this guy was sick. Under the referee's signal, the two men stepped forward and bumped fists. Because they were playing MMA, which was unrestricted fighting, the two men did not wear boxing gloves, but the UFC gloves that exposed the fingers. At the beginning of the game, Pu Taemin attacked first. His 2 feet were constantly rubbing on the ground, changing his position and circling around Knerson Peters. Knerson Peters just stood in place and looked at him indifferently, waiting to see what tricks he was going to play. Maybe he felt that he had tested enough. Pu Taemin stepped on his right foot without saying a word. In an instant, his body speed reached the limit and rushed toward Knerson Peters's lower body. If the small man fought the big man, there was a 90% chance that he would not be able to beat the opponent. What's more, Knerson Peters was more than 2 meters tall. It was really scary standing there. If he stood there and fought, no matter how high his feet were, he would not be able to hit the opponent. Therefore, when the small man and the big man competed, or even fought, as long as they rolled together, they would have the advantage. An inch longer, an inch stronger, and an inch shorter, an inch more dangerous. This was not a joke. The reason why Pu Taemin was so famous in Europe was that he learned Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Kyokushin karate. His combat effectiveness on the ground was quite strong. When he rushed over, he would directly hit the opponent's abdomen in the next second. Then he would knock the man down, and the ground would be his world. But Knerson Peters's combat experience was not worse than him. Although his brain was not very good, he was absolutely not careless when fighting. If it was in the black boxing arena where life and death was not a matter of life and death, he might have directly grabbed the opponent's head and kneed him. But here, attacking the opponent's head would be a loss, so he just stretched out his big hand and instantly pressed the man's shoulder. The huge force made Pu Taemin completely unable to move in an instant. Damn it! Feeling the huge force from Knerson Peters, Pu Taemin could not help but clench his teeth. He thought that Knerson Peters would be very strong. After all, he was big, but he did not expect this guy to be so strong. After being pressed down, since he could not attack head-on, he would attack from below. Pu Taemin thought of this and instantly slipped under his feet. He rolled directly and instantly lay on the ground. Then, his 2 legs, one in front and one behind, clamped the bend of Knerson Peters's legs. This was also a basic skill in fighting. It could make a big man with a high center of gravity fall because of losing his center of gravity. But unfortunately, this also depended on the opponent's level. Knerson Peters was originally very strong. Now that he had nothing to do, he trained at home every day. In addition, he ate beef and fish with spiritual energy. His physical fitness had far exceeded that of ordinary people. It was not a problem to say that he was infinitely close to the limit of human beings. Of course, it was only in terms of strength. So although it was a joint technique, Knerson Peters's legs did not even bend. Looking at his movements, Knerson Peters could not help but bend down to grab his legs. Seeing Knerson Peters bend down, the man's eyes could not help but light up. Then, he instantly supported his wrist and kicked Knerson Peters's chin. Although Taekwondo was not very effective in fighting, the strength of the legs was very strong. Moreover, for a sure kill opportunity like this, there was still some morality. So when he saw Knerson Peters bending down, Pu Taemin could not help but laugh in his heart. This time, he would definitely win. He was already thinking about his next move. This kick hit Knerson Peters's chin, making him dizzy. Then, he stood up with a carp flip, followed by a knee strike, and then rode on his body. His 2 hands kept hitting his opponent's head. Well, this was the end of the match. However, although he had thought it through well, and had even thought about how to flirt with Hanja after the game, things were not as simple as he thought. Just as his foot was about to hit Knerson Peters' right hand, which had been idle all this time, suddenly reached out and grabbed his ankle in front of his surprised eyes. This is bad. Seeing Knerson Peters's action, Pu Taemin shouted in his heart, but he did not panic. Instead, he used his other foot to kick Knerson Peters's face in an instant, trying to pull his foot back. But unfortunately, Knerson Peters did not give him this opportunity. When he grabbed his ankle, Knerson Peters had already stood up abruptly, then swung it directly. Then, under the surprised and puzzled eyes of the audience and the referee, he directly swung his leg up and slammed it heavily into the ring in front of him. Bang! With a loud noise, Pu Tae-min was directly smashed into the ring. Fortunately, the ring was hollow, and it was just a piece of cloth, not a real concrete floor. Otherwise, this would be enough to make him half dead. But Knerson Peters did not stop there. He grabbed Pu Tae-min's leg, and when Pu Tae-min was powerless to resist and his whole body was sore, he smashed Pu Tae-min 7 times. Just like how the Hulk smashed Loki in Avengers. He grabbed Pu Tae-min's leg and smashed him to the ground. Perhaps after 7 smashes, he remembered the rules and casually threw Pu Tae-min to the side. But at this time, Pu Tae-min had already fainted and lost consciousness. His eyes were white, his mouth was crooked, and his body was like noodles. At least a few bones were broken. If it were not for his chest that was still moving up and down slightly, it could be concluded that he was dead. When the referee saw this situation, he reacted immediately and immediately called the medical staff who had been prepared for a long time. What else is there to say? Send him to the hospital immediately. Looking at those people who were busy there, Knerson Peters couldn't help but smile disdainfully. Can't even withstand a single blow. Saying the words that Jong Hai had taught him, Knerson Peters slowly walked to the side of the field, then opened the door and went out. He did not return to the locker room, but went straight to the stairs on the 2nd floor. Looking at Knerson Peters who walked over, the audience was silent. Everyone looked at him with only horror in their eyes. Even Terrell Jean in the box next to Jong Hai's, and Balian Madun, who wanted to discuss business with Jong Hai, were so scared that they couldn't close their mouths. As for Madun's bodyguard and driver, he looked at Knerson Peters with 30% vigilance, 20% horror, and 50% fear. He didn't know how many rounds he could last in the hands of this big guy. But judging from the current situation, he shouldn't be able to hold on for more than a minute. At this time, in Park Tae-min's room, seeing that he was beaten to the point that even his mother couldn't recognize him, his coach, driver, and his 2 girlfriends quickly fled. As for Han Jaron and Yen Zhengxuan, after looking at each other, they also left quietly. Just now, they felt that Park Tae-min was up to no good. If they didn't leave now, when would they? Good job. Jong Hai didn't know about these things, and he wasn't clear about it. Looking at Knerson Peters who was walking back, Jong Hai said to him with a smile. Hearing Jong Hai's words, Knerson Peters also smiled honestly. For him, he was Jong Hai's boxing glove. He would beat whoever Jong Hai asked him to. He picked up his clothes next to him and went to the bathroom to change again. Then he stood behind Jong Hai, just like before. But at this time, Balian Madun and the others had to pay more attention to him than to Jong Hai. Mr. Jong, this warrior, where did you hire him? Looking at Knerson Peters, Balian Madun thought for a moment and asked. If he also had such a warrior, his personal safety wouldn't be a problem. If he brought him to such a fighting arena in the future, Teskase, how glorious would that be? So after hesitating for a moment, he still asked. Oh, he wasn't hired, he's my family. Hearing Balian Madun's words, Jong Hai smiled. Hearing Jong Hai's words, Balian Madun also nodded indifferently. He understood what Jong Hai meant. Don't even think about hiring him, and the most important thing is, how much money does Jong Hai have? He knows very well. So there's no need to say anything like a price. When the time comes, Jong Hai will slap him in the face, and it will be a resounding slap. After giving up on this thought, Balian Madun continued to talk with Jong Hai. He acted as if nothing happened just now, so he had to admit that this guy is a very good businessman. After the two chatted together for a while, they left here. As for the later program, they naturally didn't need to. Looking at the 2 people around Jong Hai who were qualified to be celebrities, Balian Madun didn't want to leave a bad impression on his wife. So after the 2 left here, they parted ways. Jong Hai and the others returned directly to the hotel. They still have to continue the negotiation tomorrow. Chapter 1034. Jong Hai's character, how should one describe it? Everyone should have some understanding of him, and he had been afraid of his own character more than once. This guy was cunning, lazy, and greedy. His only strength might be that he was not slippery. He was more serious about everything, and he would not fool others. He had poor self-control. When facing beautiful women, although he would not be a pervert, nor would he be despised by others, as long as beautiful women pushed him, the success rate was still quite high. Moreover, when facing his own women, he did not know how to reject them. Of course, this was only limited to the women around him. As for those outsiders, they only wanted money, and Zhang Hai would not care about them. Zhang Hai really had many shortcomings. He was greedy, lecherous, gluttonous, lazy, unsympathetic, disunited, and would not work hard for the rise of the nation and the country. It could be said that people who were on the moral high ground would feel that Zhang Hai was problematic, and no matter how they looked at him, they would not find him pleasing to the eye. However, Zhang Hai was like this, and he did not change his mind after hearing their words. Moreover, he also had a problem, and that was, he did not have a passion for anything. In the past, he wanted to raise chickens, but now the chickens were basically raised by Daliana and Marion, and by the way, the wyverns were also raised by them. When he wanted to grow vegetables, the vegetables were all taken care of by Xueqi and the others, including rice. After the initial stage was done, he did not care about it anymore. Every day, Xueqi and the others were patrolling. He did not help with raising cows, catching fish, or playing. In the past, he wanted to play basketball, so he specially built a warehouse to be used as a basketball court, but now he did not need it. It could be said that Zhang Hai's patience was extremely poor, and his character was very easy to give up, but God was so blind. The Dragon Ball that could change everyone's fate was in his hands, and no one could do anything about it. If it was in the hands of someone who loved the country, maybe it would be dissected and studied. Of course, Zhang Hai was just imagining things. He was now lying on a deck chair next to the swimming pool on the top floor of the hotel, calmly basking in the sun, drinking juice, and playing with his phone. Yes, he had no interest in negotiations. After 2 days of negotiations, Zhang Hai's excitement had worn off. The next night, he specially asked Zhang Jin to send 2 people over to take over the negotiations. He was a little tired. After stating his bottom line, on the 3rd day, he no longer cared about anything. If it were someone else, they might go to France to play when they had nothing to do, but Zhang Hai wasn't interested. He had already been to the landmark buildings in France, and there was nothing new about it. Therefore, he was prepared to force himself to return to the state he was in when he was in the manor. Just like now, he was sunbathing and playing here. Although the spiritual energy here was far worse than the one in the manor, it was still good to bask in the sun occasionally. Just as Zhang Hai was happily basking in the sun, 2 figures came over from a distance. Looking at the 2 figures, Zhang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. They hadn't left yet. Yes, the 2 people were none other than Han Jiaran and Yan Zhengxuan. Zhang Hai didn't see them yesterday, so he thought they had left. Now, it seemed that they weren't ready to go back so soon. Thinking about it, although they weren't as rich as him, they were still famous actors in South Korea. Their income wasn't low, so it wouldn't be a problem for them to play in France for a while. When Zhang Hai was looking at them, they also saw Zhang Hai. Yan Zhengxuan couldn't help but excitedly wave at Zhang Hai. Although Han Jiaran didn't mention anything about Zhang Hai, he had roughly inquired about him these days. He knew that the man who helped them solve the housing problem was a rich man. A very rich man. The status of South Korean artists was actually not very high, at least compared with businessmen and so on. It was indeed a little worse. Now that he had the opportunity to meet Zhang Hai, Yan Zhengxuan walked over with a smile after seeing Zhang Hai. "Hello, Mr. Zhang. Are you basking in the sun here?" Looking at Zhang Hai, Yan Zhengxuan said with a smile. "Oh, hello. You also came to bask in the sun?" Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also raised his head and said with a smile. "Yes, I'm a little tired from walking these 2 days. Today, I'm going to have a good rest in the hotel. What is Mr. Zhang doing?" Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Yan Zhengxuan said with a smile. "Oh, I'm playing with WeChat." Zhang Hai said while showing this thing a little. "It's a social network. I'm not very good at this. Usually, it's my manager who does it." Although he doesn't know what WeChat is, South Korea also has a similar thing called KT, but Yan Zhengxuan himself doesn't play with these things. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai could only laugh. then ignored him and continued to play with his mobile phone. Seeing that he killed the conversation, Yen Zhengxuan was also a little embarrassed, but fortunately, he quickly recovered. After lying here for a while, some passing foreign girls were about to steal his soul away. After saying something to the Korean woman next to him, he plunged into the water and went to find the foreign girl who had just flirted with him. It seems that your husband is still not very honest. Looking at Yen Zhengxuan, who quickly hid in the water and played with some foreign girls, Zhang Hai put the phone aside and said calmly. Although Zhang Hai didn't look at her, Han Jiaran also knew that this bastard was talking to her. This is our family matter, it has nothing to do with you. Hearing what Zhang Hai said, she bit her lip. Although she has always wanted to avoid Zhang Hai, sometimes fate is so bullshit. She always wants to avoid him, but she always inadvertently meets him. Tiske. Well, let's not talk about him. I haven't seen you for so long, did you miss me? Turning his head to look at the Korean woman, Zhang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the Korean woman over there was about to go crazy. This guy is too shameless. What do you mean by that? Not daring to look at Zhang Hai, the Korean woman looked straight ahead and said to Zhang Hai, who was across the recliner. It's the literal meaning. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also teased her. If Zhang Hai has made any progress over the years, it must be that his level of flirting with girls is in a straight line. After all, real knowledge comes from practice. His practical experience is quite rich. He is not the person who was forcefully pushed by Aphrodite and didn't know what to do. Bastard. Snorting at Zhang Hai, Han Jiaran really couldn't stay here any longer. She picked up her towel and was about to leave. Looking at her back, Zhang Hai thought for a moment and left behind her. As for Yen Zhengxuan, he was still having fun in the water. Following Zhang Hai walked into the hotel, but just as she took the elevator, Zhang Hai also walked in. Seeing Zhang Hai coming in, she couldn't resist. Just when she wanted to press the button for her floor, Zhang Hai grabbed her hand, and then Zhang Hai pressed the elevator for his floor. You, what are you doing? Seeing that Zhang Hai contacted her and didn't let her press the elevator button, the Korean woman panicked a little. She couldn't help but struggle a little, trying to shake off Zhang Hai's hand. Don't waste your energy. There are surveillance cameras here. If you keep making trouble and bring the security guards here, you and I won't be able to cover it. Hearing Zhang Hai's understatement, the Korean man's blood almost went cold by half. You beast. Didn't you say you would keep it a secret? Hearing what Zhang Hai said, she finally stopped struggling, but she still gritted her teeth and said. After hearing her words, Zhang Hai smiled. Yeah, I didn't tell your husband and others. Don't worry, my mouth is very tight. Hearing what she said, Zhang Hai also smiled, and then said to her. He didn't know why, but this woman always gave Zhang Hai a feeling of wanting to bully her. As for whether her face was fake or not, it had nothing to do with Zhang Hai. Anyway, Zhang Hai couldn't take her back, right? You shameless. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the Korean woman said angrily, but just after she finished speaking, Zhang Hai turned back and kissed her on the mouth. When the two lips met, Zhang Hai also began to attack. After a long time, when she recovered from that feeling, they had already arrived at Zhang Hai's floor. Zhang Hai didn't say anything. He directly carried her in his arms and walked into his suite. After entering the suite, the two didn't say much, since it has already come to this. Then let's start. Normal, back, standing, sky train. I don't understand what you are talking about. An hour later, the Korean woman was lying in front of Zhang Hai's indescribable existence. Why is there no progress? Didn't you train? Where can I train? Do you want me to train with others? Staring at Zhang Hai, the Korean woman said very unhappily. No, but didn't your husband do this with you? Hearing the Korean woman's words, Zhang Hai was really embarrassed. With that person. How is it possible? Hearing Zhang Hai talk about this topic, the Korean woman's face suddenly turned red and she couldn't help but say with some embarrassment. Hearing what she said, Zhang Hai couldn't help but shake his head. Such beautiful lips, I can't even do it 10 times a day. How can he endure it? Looking at the Korean woman, Zhang Hai said with a smile, then felt a little pain. If you talk nonsense again, I'm leaving. Glaring at Zhang Hai, the Korean woman said with shame and anger. Good. You are the best. If you need anything in the future, remember to call me. A day as husband and wife means endless grace. No matter what, I can help you once. Looking at her appearance, Zhang Hai said in a rare serious tone. Chapter 1035. Really? Hearing what Zhang Hai said, Corin couldn't help but raise her head in surprise. She knew that Zhang Hai would never like her. Of course, she wouldn't like Zhang Hai either. They are together, in fact, more for each other's needs. She didn't intend to ask Zhang Hai for anything, but now Zhang Hai said that he could help her once in the future. She was a little surprised. She knew how powerful Zhang Hai was. If such a man said that he could help her once, then he could probably solve anything in the country. Thinking of this, she suddenly felt that she didn't suffer a loss. Not only did she get to enjoy the powerful existence of Zhang Hai, but she also got a promise. Thinking of this, she vomited even harder. Not bad. Do you want to do it again? Looking at her, Zhang Hai asked with a smile. Yes, but it has to be fast. That person may be aware of it soon. Hearing Zhang Hai's suggestion, Corin hesitated and nodded. Sometimes it's really hard to tell who is taking advantage of who, isn't it? Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also directly picked up his gun and the battle began again. About 40 minutes later, Yan Zhengxuan, who was having a good time, finally found that his wife was gone, Zhang Hai was also gone, and no one answered his phone, so he returned to his room with a suspicious attitude. As a result, after coming back, he found that his wife was sitting on the sofa and watching TV with her legs crossed. Looking at the half-eaten potato chips next to her, it was obvious that she had been back for a while. Seeing this scene, Yan Zhengxuan was relieved. When did you come back? Why didn't you tell me? I called your cell phone, but no one answered. While preparing to walk to the bathroom, Yan Zhengxuan said to her, but his eyes were looking at her, waiting for Corin's answer. What did I say to you? I was afraid to disturb your flirting mood with the little girl. The phone ran out of battery in the bag. She rolled her eyes at Yan Zhengxuan and said indifferently. Hearing her words, Yan Zhengxuan smiled awkwardly. It was indeed difficult to accept. Then he walked into the bathroom to take a shower. After he entered the bathroom, Han Jiaran heaved a sigh of relief. Looking at the 71% battery on her phone, she couldn't help but curl her lips and continue eating potato chips. This small episode was really just a small episode. In the evening, Zhang Hai received news that the negotiations were almost done. Balian Madan was also very persistent. The price could be raised to 20%, or even 21%. However, he not only wanted Europe, but also the special rights in the Middle East. However, those people were not sure about this idea, so they still talked to Zhang Hai in the evening. Zhang Hai was already a little bored here, so he waved his hand. So be it. The Middle East was given to him. Anyway, Du Feimin didn't know that Zhang Hai produced red wine here. After this idea was made, they could sign the contract tomorrow. Of course, before that, they still had to fight for the profits they should get. 1% of the price was also a small amount of money. According to Zhang Hai's $800 per bottle, 1% was $8 per bottle. If he wanted 10,000 bottles, it would be $80,000, and 50,000 bottles would be $400,000. How could he earn this money? Moreover, if this brand became famous, Zhang Hai's $2,000 per bottle would be $20. 50,000 bottles would be $1 million, 100,000 bottles would be $2 million, and 1 million bottles would be $20 million. Although he didn't care about this small amount of money, well, look at his arrogance. He couldn't just give it to the other party for free, right? After confirming the policy, the person in charge of the negotiation went back to his suite to sleep. Dulles Gerard breathed a sigh of relief. He could once again generate income for the manor. He could also look forward to this year's income. Zhang Hai continued to sleep with Azalina and Wallace Shelley in his arms. Wallace Shelley's two indescribable existences were quite gorgeous and extraordinarily large. Zhang Hai's hands were not small. He could easily catch a basketball with one hand, but he couldn't catch her with one hand. Both hands couldn't completely wrap around her. Coupled with her white skin, deep 5 points of view, and golden hair, she was quite attractive. Zhang Hai couldn't put her down. Most importantly, she was very open. As long as Zhang Hai said something, as long as Zhang Hai wanted it, she would do it. Therefore, She was also one of Zhang Hai's favorite people in the manor besides Qi Ya and Ai Xiaoxi. Although he fought with the Han Jia people twice during the day, at night, Zhang Hai was always energetic when facing Azalina and Wallace Shelley. Naturally, there was another battle at night. After the battle, Zhang Hai also fell asleep with them in his arms. But just as he fell asleep, a burst of urgent ringtones sounded. When he picked it up, Zhang Hai found that the person who called was not someone else, but Qi Li. Although he was a little confused, because they just finished the phone call today, just when they were negotiating the contract, why did she call again now? Hello, Qi Li, what's the matter? After picking up the phone, Zhang Hai asked Qi Li on the other side of the phone. Zhang, my mother is in the hospital. Zhang Hai's voice just fell. Qi Li on the other side had already said with a trace of sobbing. Wait. Slow down. What's the situation? How did she get hospitalized? Hearing Qi Li's sobbing words, Zhang Hai immediately asked. At this time, Du Ning, who had been staying beside Qi Li, snatched the phone. Zhang Xueqi called Sister Qi just now and told her that the old lady suddenly fainted. She couldn't explain it clearly, so Sister Qi asked her to call 120. Just now, the ambulance arrived and said that the old lady might have an acute heart attack. Now, she has been sent to the hospital for emergency treatment. The specific situation is still unclear. We have already booked the plane tickets and will set off immediately. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Ning quickly told what had happened. Okay, I am relieved that you are with Qi Li. I will call Qi Jie and Qi Ya immediately and arrange for them to return to Huaxia immediately. I am now in France. I will call the crew members immediately and return to Bing City. Hearing Du Ning's words, Zhang Hai had never been so relieved to leave Du Ning with Qi Li. At this time, they were still quite reliable. After comforting Du Ning for a while, Zhang Hai had already gotten up. Azalina and Wallace Shelley had already gotten up when they heard Zhang Hai's voice on the phone. While putting on their clothes, they called the crew members. Although it was in the middle of the night, it was Zhang Hai's plane. Zhang Hai directly gave the crew 3 times the bonus, so the crew members all got up. They lived near the airport and began to repair the plane after they arrived. After putting on his clothes, Zhang Hai found Dulles Gerard and authorized him to be in charge of tomorrow's negotiations. He directly told him that he would directly throw out the contract for tomorrow's negotiations. The Middle East and Europe could be given to him, with a 20% discount. If it was acceptable, he would sign the contract. If not, it would be cancelled directly. After learning that Zhang Hai had something to do, Dulles Gerard also nodded. He knew Zhang Hai's temper and character. He valued his family very much. Not to mention wine, even if it was beef or fish, he would give them up. This was his character. This was also the reason why so many people were loyal to him. While rushing to the airport, Zhang Hai also woke up Qi Jie and Qi Ya. At the same time, he booked the earliest flight to the capital for them. Because Zhang Hai was not there, he deliberately transferred Biliak back from the Tunglong Company to ensure the safety of the girls. One of them would drive the 2 sisters to New York. After arranging everything here, Zhang Hai immediately called Qi Li. Although he and Qi Li had been quarreling, Zhang Hai still respected Qi Li's mother very much. After all, she was also his mother-in-law, and she helped him when he needed help the most. Now that her parents had passed away, it could be said that she was also his family, so he was also very anxious. At this time, Qi Li's mood had calmed down a little. Du Ning drove the car, and the two were now rushing to the airport. Qi Li was also a little calmer now. When Zhang Hai went to arrange things, she also called the hospital. At this time, her mother had been pushed into the operating room, and it was preliminarily confirmed that she had an acute heart attack. Perhaps because the Qi family was originally quite rich and well-connected, there were no accidents. The doctors were quite ethical. When the ambulance came, they immediately performed the surgery and waited for the family to come back. At about 3 o'clock in the morning in France, Zhang Hai, Azalina, and Wallace Shelley got on the plane to Bing City. Because this was Zhang Hai's own plane, there was no need to make a detour in the capital. As for Qi Jie and Qi Ya, they had to make a detour in the capital. They really didn't expect that such a thing would happen inexplicably. It was really a misfortune for their family. The next morning, before Yan Zhengshuan got up, Han Jiaran hesitated for a moment and decided to go to Zhang Hai. Of course, She didn't go to see him. She just wanted to come and see him. But when she arrived at Zhang Hai's room, she found that he was gone. Only some housekeepers were there, cleaning up the room. Hey! Has the person who lives here left? Looking at the spotless room, Han Jiaran asked with some doubts. Oh, it's you. Mr. Zhang's family suddenly had an accident, so he left first. What's the matter? At this time, Dulles Gerard and Knerson Peters in the next suite came out. Looking at Han Jiaran, Dulles Gerard said with a smile. He still had some impression of this South Korean. Oh no, nothing. Then I'll leave first. Hearing that Zhang Hai had left, Han Jiaran didn't know why she suddenly felt a little empty in her heart. Fortunately, she was an actress. After quickly hiding it, she hurried downstairs. Chapter 1036. Of course, Zhang Hai did not know what happened in France at this time. For him, if he knew that Han Jia had come to find him, he would not feel lucky. Instead, he would feel a little worried. What a joke. He did not intend to have a close relationship with this South Korean. So be it. However, it was impossible for him to bring her home. It was impossible for him to risk such universal condemnation. But sometimes, not knowing anything was also a kind of happiness. Phew, here we are. Wrapping his coat, Zhang Hai glanced at the covered bridge in front of him, and then walked into the Taiping International Airport in Bingqing with Azalina and Wallace Shelley in the morning sun. Although there was a 6-hour time difference between Paris and the United States, the flight time was only 2 hours apart. It took about 13 hours to fly from the capital to the United States, and 11 hours to fly from the capital to Paris. Zhang Hai's private jet could control the speed of the flight, but it still took him 10 hours to fly. Zhang Hai got on the plane at 3 o'clock in the morning in France. The imperial capital was 7 hours faster than Paris. That is to say, when they took off, it was already 10 o'clock in the morning in China. After flying for more than 10 hours when they landed, it was already 9 o'clock in the evening, which was 21 o'clock. Although Bing City was called Little Paris in the east, the weather here was indeed worse than Paris. Of course, the highest temperature every day was about the same. It was the end of April, and the temperature was almost 20 degrees during the day. But at night, it was much colder in Bing City than in Paris, which was 10 degrees. When Zhang Hai got off the plane and walked out of the airport, he saw Du Ning, who came to pick them up at the airport parking lot. When they were on the plane, Zhang Hai had received the news that Qi Li's mother had been rescued, but the doctor also said that the situation was not very good. She needed a stent. Otherwise, the next time she fell ill, no one knew what would happen. However, as long as they could be saved, it was a good thing that nothing happened to them immediately. That was why Zhang Hai and the others didn't have to be so anxious. How's the situation? Sitting in Du Ning's Rolls-Royce, Zhang Hai asked her. She's fine. The old lady has already woken up. She knows people, but her mental state is normal. She's weak. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, this might be the best answer. If their mental state was particularly good, then it might be troublesome. As the old saying goes, the final radiance of the setting sun. Look at those who had been sick for a long time. If one day they suddenly became energetic, could walk, and could eat and drink, then it meant that the situation was bad. At this time, it was useless to go to the hospital because no symptoms could be detected. However, it was estimated that it would be over in a few days. It was difficult to explain with science, but Zhang Hai had seen it with his own eyes. Now that he knew that the old lady was still alive, Zhang Hai was relieved, but after being relieved, his brows also wrinkled. The things in Zhang Hai's manner all have spiritual energy. Not to say that after eating it, it can cure all diseases, but it can also strengthen the body. Since Zhang Hai began to raise cattle and fish, not to mention Zhang Hai, who has the Dragon Ball, even his employees, as well as those girls, didn't even catch a cold. All of them were quite healthy. Qi Jie often joked that she was useless as a doctor. Qi Li was a very filial daughter. In the beginning, before Zhang Hai and her got back together, she would also take back the beef she got from Zhang Hai to her mother to eat. Later, when Zhang Hai wanted to get closer to her, he couldn't be stingy with the food. Not to mention how much could his mother-in-law and Zheng Xueqi eat. So he would send them once every 10 days to half a month. If they ate Zhang Hai's beef and fish, they would have a heart attack. To be honest, He didn't understand. Could it be that beef and fish are useless in Huaxia? Impossible. I went to Qi Li's restaurant to eat. Although the spiritual energy dissipated a little, there was still spiritual energy. What's going on? Sitting in the back seat, Jiang Hai touched his chin and thought. He really couldn't understand it. Unknowingly, the car had already driven to the hospital parking lot. After Jiang Hai and the others got out of the car, they walked into an intensive care unit. When they walked in, they found that Qi Li's mother had just fallen asleep. Qi Li was sitting beside her at this time, touching her hand and looking at her face. Feeling that someone came in, Qi Li also raised her head. When she saw that it was Jiang Hai, her eyes couldn't help but flash a trace of tears. It's okay, I'm here. How is our mother? Looking at Qi Li's eyes, Jiang Hai also walked over and pressed his big hand on her head, then looked at his mother-in-law lying in front of him and asked Qi Li. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also whispered in Jiang Hai's ear. Fortunately, the doctor said that it was a myocardial infarction. If it had been 10 minutes later, it might have been dangerous. Now that he has been given medicine to dredge the blood vessels, he woke up for a while and was a little confused, then he fell asleep again. Hearing what Qi Li said, Jiang Hai also looked at his mother-in-law in front of him. He looked left and right, but he didn't feel a trace of spiritual qi in her body. However, the old lady's complexion was still quite good when she went back during the new year. How could it be possible that Qi Li's mother had become like this in just a few months? It should be known that Qi Li's mother was only in her 50s this year. Moreover, she had never suffered any hardships in her life. She had been living a good life since she was in her 30s. Usually, she paid attention to her health. Jiang Hai was a little puzzled that he would have a heart attack in such a situation, so he had to ask clearly. Du Ning, take care of my mother-in-law first. Qi Li, come out for a while. Glancing at Qi Li, Jiang Hai said to Du Ning, then walked out first. The old lady was fine now, which was the most important thing, but the reason still had to be investigated. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also let go of her mother's hand and followed Jiang Hai to the corridor. When they turned to a place where there was no one, Jiang Hai looked at Qi Li. I suspect that our mother may have been tricked by someone else. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai said directly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li's eyes were instantly stunned. Are you kidding me? Someone dares to trick my mother? This is courting death. Are you sure? Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Li said with killing intent. Jiang Hai also nodded gently. The beef and fish in my manor have a special substance in them. Not only can it make the fish and beef delicious, but most importantly, it can also make people's health better and better. I will send those ingredients to our mother every 10 days or half a month. Logically speaking, she eats those things every day. Let alone having a heart attack, it is impossible for her to have a cold or fever. But after I came here today, our mother's face was a little dark. She probably didn't eat my beef and fish after the new year. Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. He and Qi Li have that kind of relationship, and they are also partners. She naturally noticed that Jiang Hai's beef and fish are a little different. She also eats them every day. Indeed, she doesn't have any disease, and even if she is tired the day before, after eating and sleeping, she will be 100 times more energetic the next day. She originally thought that this might be the power of love. But now it seems that this should be the power of beef and fish. Jiang Hai's food has such a special effect. She was just guessing and was not sure. Now she is sure, but she will not ask Jiang Hai how to do it. Are you suspecting that there is a mole? My mother's things are generally taken care of by Xueqi. Xueqi was raised by our family. She will not do anything bad to us. Hearing Jiang Hai's resolute words, Qi Li said with some hesitation. I'm not saying that it must be her. Let's wait and see. I'm just telling you about the situation. As for the specifics, we have to investigate again. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai sighed. If this matter is really done by Zhang Xueqi, Qi Li and the others will be quite sad. After all, raising an ingrate is quite a headache. By the way, is your red wine contract going well? After talking about the old lady, Qi Li also wanted to change her mind, so she asked Jiang Hai about his red wine business. Who knows? I asked Dulles Gerard to talk about it. It's only about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Paris. There shouldn't be a definite answer yet. There should be a letter in 2 or 3 hours. Hearing Qi Li's words, Zhang Hai shook his head and said. He really didn't know how the negotiations in Paris were going, but thinking about it, with Dulles Gerard, he won't let him suffer. Besides, he has already explained where his bottom line is. Alas, I really can't tell that you have left me further and further behind in the past 2 or 3 years. I really regret it a little. If I had given up when I married you and let you help me in the company, would the cheese enterprise be bigger now and we would be more intimate? Looking at Zhang Hai, Qi Li took a deep breath. She was too young and impetuous at the beginning. If she had accepted her fate earlier, she didn't know if there would have been a better result. After Zhang Hai heard her words, he also chuckled and didn't say anything, because he knew his own situation. The reason why he had such achievements now was inseparable from his possession of the Dragon Balls. If Qi Li really accepted him at the beginning, would he still have the Dragon Balls? No one knows, because every timeline is different. Chapter 1037. It was a quiet night. In fact, there was nothing much to talk about. After all, they were in the hospital, and they had to be quiet. Qi Li and Du Ning stayed with him for the whole night. Zhang Hai went to the place where the beds were rented and rented 2 more military uniforms. Fortunately, the ward was big enough. Originally, people had to stay in a ward like this. Now that it was changed into an intensive care unit, there were only 2 beds. However, it was not a problem to put up 2 more beds in other places. After letting Azalina and Wallace Shelley stay for the night, Zhang Hai went to the car and spent the night in it. The next morning, Zhang Hai got out of the car with a yawn. He had to admit that it was really tiring to spend the night in the car. Zhang Hai was still tall, and the Rolls-Royce had a lot of space. However, Zhang Hai was lying in the front, and his legs were empty. He could not lie in the back, and it was very uncomfortable. He either had to curl his neck or empty legs. Fortunately, with his strong physique, he recovered after a few hours of sleep. At dawn, he got out of the car. The sun rose very early in Bing City. In summer, the sun rose at around 3 a.m. In winter, it was the shortest day, and the sun rose at around 6 a.m. When Zhang Hai went to school in the past, he had to get up early to take the bus. Every day, he would wake up at 5:30 a.m., have breakfast, wash up, and then leave at 6 a.m. He would take the bus at one stop, and it would take him about an hour to get to his high school. The arrival time of his high school was 7:10 a.m., and he could only leave at this time. Therefore, Zhang Hai was very used to the weather in Bing City. Although it was not winter now, and for some other places, spring might have ended. But for Bing City, winter had just ended. Although the temperature at night would not drop below 0, it would be at least 3 or 4 degrees. The temperature difference between day and night was very big. It was quite cold in the morning when the sun rose. But even so, because the sun rose early, the people in Bing City also went to work early. Zhang Hai got out of the car and stretched his stiff neck. Looking at the distance, there were already a lot of people moving around. Some were students going to school, some were employees going to work, and some were sanitation workers. Taking advantage of the fact that there were fewer people in the morning, they quickly cleaned up the debris on the road. Let's get something to eat. After stretching for a while, he looked at the time. It was already 5 a.m. Zhang Hai touched his stomach, which had only eaten 1 meal on the plane yesterday, and whispered. Zhang Hai took out his mobile phone to check. There was a morning market nearby, and he did not drive. He used the GPS to drive there. The morning market was one of the more unique places in Huaxia. In addition to selling breakfast, there were also a lot of things that were sold there. Vegetables, seafood, meat, fruits, and general merchandise were sold there. It could be said that everything could be found there. There used to be a morning market near Zhang Hai's house. When he was in school, he liked to go there to buy a fire spoon to eat. This fire spoon wasn't made with fire. Although Zhang Hai suspected that the people here learned it after listening to the crosstalk, they didn't really learn it. This was because the fire-steamed ladles in the Central Plains were similar to meat sandwiches. It was completely different from the steamed ladles in Bing City. This steamed ladle was made with bread and meat, and then it was fried in a pan of oil. It could also be said that it was fried and eaten after it was cooked. Although it was not difficult to cook, it tasted good. Jiang Hai liked this steamed ladle since he was young. These few years, when he was in the US, he would occasionally fry it and eat it. It was quite good. Other than the steamed ladles, the breakfast in Bing City was quite rich. The big fruits were fried and piping hot. There were also wontons, ramen, tofu pudding, etc. To be honest, if Feng Yu did not eat them for a long time, he would miss them. According to the navigation, Jiang Hai found the morning market here. At a glance, both sides of the street were selling things. Some urban management officers were here to maintain law and order. Perhaps this was one of the few places where they could be so harmonious. The reason why the morning market was called the morning market was because it didn't open during the day. The morning market had to be finished before 7:30 in the morning. Around 8 o'clock in the morning peak, there would be no more. Just like the night market also had to wait until the evening peak to be over before it could open. Jiang Hai was very familiar with the morning market. After he entered, he saw the 200 renminbi he asked from Chile yesterday. It was enough to buy breakfast. After entering the morning market, Jiang Hai went straight to the steamed ladle stall and bought 40 steamed ladles. These ladles were very small. Men could only eat one steamed ladle in one bite, and women could only eat one steamed ladle in 2 bites. After buying 40 steamed ladles, Jiang Hai went to buy big fruits, fried dough sticks, and some soy milk and tofu pudding. After spending almost all the 200 renminbi, Jiang Hai was ready to go back. But before he left, he saw a stall in the distance surrounded by a lot of people. Jiang Hai glanced over and was a little surprised, because this stall was selling giant salamanders. But it was not the small ones for children to play with. It was the big ones, about 3 to 4 caddies. Many people surrounded him at this time, looking at these things, but no one was buying them. "Brother, you better run away. This is a protected animal. How dare you sell it?" After Jiang Hai came over, some people in the crowd said to the man selling giant salamanders. But looking at the greedy look in his eyes, it seemed that he wanted to buy them. "I have nothing to do with them. They are farmed. They all have a number. They can be sold." However, after listening to his words, the other party shook his head with a smile and said indifferently. Jiang Hai had heard about the farming of giant salamanders a long time ago. Even the Imperial Court TV broadcast the farming situation, but it was the first time he saw the real thing. Farmed? That's boring. How much is your giant salamander? Hearing that it was farmed, many people lost interest in looking at it. People in Huaxia were like this. For wild and farmed animals, they were obviously biased towards wild things. In the United States, wild and farmed animals were only biased towards farmed animals because the farmed environment was better. For example, cattle had their own labels. What they ate, whether they were sick or not, could be controlled. But you didn't know if there were any parasites in the wild. This was also why there were often people in the United States who went into the mountains to hunt, but they didn't eat the prey they hunted. Instead, they directly put it there to nourish the earth. Of course, there were some exceptions, such as Jiang Hai, who liked to eat the deer or wild boar he hunted. 300 per catty. Hearing someone asking for the price, this person also raised 3 fingers and said to the crowd. Hearing this person's words, the crowd here suddenly dispersed by 2/3. As they walked away, they were still talking. 300 yuan to eat it? Indeed, 300 yuan per catty. One fish weighed almost 3 catties. This was a little less than 1,000 yuan. Although the people who came to the morning market to buy things were not poor, they were definitely people who spent less money. They were a little reluctant to spend 1,000 yuan to buy this thing. However, Jiang Hai's eyes suddenly twitched. This thing seemed to be a way to make money, but this idea was quickly extinguished by him. Indeed, if this thing was raised, it would make a lot of money. But this thing was difficult to raise. Jiang Hai was so lazy. If he directly raised it in the river, what if it ate his Yangtze River knife? Then who could Jiang Hai complain to? So he just looked at it, then turned and left. He carried a lot of things and went to the hospital. When he entered the ward, he just happened to see Zhang Xueqi, who had just come over. She, who had changed out of her maid costume, looked very youthful and beautiful. Her original dullness seemed to have disappeared a little. In the eyes of others, she might be a cold person. But when she saw Jiang Hai, she was obviously stunned. Then she nodded to Jiang Hai seriously and smiled. After Jiang Hai nodded to her, He saw at a glance that she was still holding an insulated lunchbox in her hand. This is. Pointing to the insulated lunchbox, Zhang Hai asked her with some doubts. This is the breakfast I prepared for Madam. Madam really scared me yesterday. Fortunately, God bless her. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Zhang Xueqi also nodded and said to him. As she spoke, there was a look of horror on her face. Breakfast? What is this? Did the old lady eat this yesterday morning? Zhang Hai, who had some doubts about Zhang Xueqi, couldn't help but be stunned after hearing her words. Then he asked her, but he was already on guard in his heart. Madam eats porridge every morning. Yesterday morning was the same, but when she was eating porridge, she received a call from Master San. It seemed that Master Tao was detained somewhere, and the old lady suddenly fell down. Hearing Zhang Hai's question, Zhang Xueqi didn't feel anything wrong and said in detail. Hearing her words, there was a voice in Zhang Hai's heart telling him that this matter must be related to Zhang Xueqi, but he didn't know whether she knew it or not. Zhang Hai, you are back. Xueqi is back too. Soon, the elevator arrived at the floor where the ward was located. Walking out of the elevator, Qi Li and the others had just come out of the ward. Seeing Zhang Hai and Zhang Xueqi coming together, her expression couldn't help but be a little strange. Can you show me the porridge in your hand? Seeing Qi Li and the others coming over, Zhang Hai handed the food in his hand to Qi Li and the others. Then he looked at Zhang Xueqi and said with a serious face. Zhang Xueqi was a little confused at this time. She looked at Qi Li and saw that Qi Li also nodded, so she handed over the insulated lunchbox without hesitation. Chapter 1038. After receiving the insulated lunchbox, Zhang Hai immediately opened it. There was indeed porridge inside. Zhang Hai smelled it, and there was no strange smell. It was just a very ordinary red date and barley porridge. It was good for ordinary women to eat it, and Zhang Hai's extraordinary sense of smell did not smell anything different. This made Zhang Hai frown. Could it be that he guessed wrong? It was not because of the food she ate, but simply because she did not eat his meat? Thinking of this, Zhang Hai was even more puzzled. But at this time, footsteps sounded, and then Qi Jie and Qi Ye quickly ran in from outside the hospital. They took off from New York at 5 o'clock in the morning. After flying to the capital, they waited for a few hours before taking the plane back to Bing City, so they had just landed. When Zhang Hai went to buy breakfast, Qi Li had already asked Du Ning to pick them up. Now the three of them were walking quickly. Seeing Qi Jie, a professional, coming, Zhang Hai immediately handed her the porridge. Qi Jie's cooking skills were quite reliable. When Qi Li sniffed the porridge, her face changed instantly, and she spat out a word, "Catch him and kill him." Hearing Qi Jie's words, Zhang Hai looked at her with some doubts, and she immediately took out her mobile phone and opened the encyclopedia. She found a plant and put it in Zhang Hai's hand, and Zhang Hai was also looking at the introduction of this plant. Catch him and kill him. Hua Xia should be called digitalis, and it is native to Central and Southern Europe. This plant is originally a medicine for heart disease, but if a healthy person takes it, or overdoses, it will cause atrial fibrillation, and with some stimulation, it is easy to induce heart disease. After letting Zhang Hai read the encyclopedia, Qi Jie began to explain. As she spoke, she looked at Zhang Xueqi. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Zhang Xueqi was shocked and took a few steps back. She leaned against the wall. No, I didn't want to harm Madam. Eldest Miss, you have to believe me. I didn't want to harm Madam. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Zhang Xueqi was completely panicked. Her legs were weak and her vision was blacked out, but she kept shouting loudly. All right, we know. You've been like our fourth sister all these years. If you wanted to harm someone, you would have done it long ago. You wouldn't have chosen to do it now. Tell us, what's going on? Or who made you do it? Hearing Zhang Xueqi's words, Qi Li's eyes turned cold. Whether it was from a humanitarian point of view or from a sisterly point of view, she trusted Zhang Xueqi very much. Moreover, it was impossible for Zhang Xueqi to know about things like digitalis. So, although she did it, the person behind it was definitely not her. Yes, it was third Madam. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Zhang Xueqi barely took a breath and then whispered. The third Madam in her mouth was actually Qi Yuanlong's wife, Zhang Yu. Zhang Hai also knew a little about this person. In the past, she was a third-tier celebrity. She thought that she had climbed up the social ladder after climbing up to Qi Yuanlong. She probably didn't have a good time recently. Explain it in detail. Hearing her words, Qi Li's eyes turned cold. She hated family thieves the most. This time, these people dared to harm her mother. These guys were really looking for death. During the new year, hearing Qi Li's words, Zhang Xueqi slowly said. She was shocked just now and hadn't completely recovered yet. Now, she was still timid when talking about it. Fortunately, Zhang Hai and the others still understood. During the new year, Qi Yuanlong's family and Qi Song's family came over. After being slapped in the face by Zhang Hai, Qi Song's family went back. In the future, they would treat it as if they didn't have relatives. They really didn't have any tricks. They couldn't bear to put down their pride. But Qi Yuanlong was different. This guy had been a troublemaker since he was a child. Not long after Zhang Hai and Qi Li left, they went to ask for help again. But this time, only Qi Yuanlong and Zhang Yu went. Originally, after they went there, they only talked about some trivial matters. Zhang Hai's mother-in-law didn't care about it. After all, he was her late husband's younger brother. She was really afraid that one day, she would die and go to hell. When she met her old man would ask her how she would answer. So, she also intended to repair their relationship. Because Zhang Yu was still young, she also went to help when Zhang Xueqi ordered the others to prepare the food at home. The first thing she did was to slander Zhang Hai and say bad things about him directly. It probably wouldn't work. After all, Zhang Hai was now the pillar of the Qi family. So, she deliberately changed the bone in the egg and said that the food sent by Zhang Hai was not good. The heavy metal in the sea fish exceeded the limit. Beef was now popular in the Western world. If it were a person with the same IQ as a normal person, they would laugh. Even if they believed it, they would go to some institutions to check it. However, Zhang Xueqi didn't know much about these things. She wanted to report it to the old lady, but Zhang Yu said that she shouldn't tell the old lady about it. It wouldn't look good. Their family was now rich, so they could just buy a new one. So the beef and fish sent by Zhang Hai in the past 6 months were all thrown away or frozen in the refrigerator by Zhang Xueqi. Hearing this, Zhang Hai couldn't help but sigh. He finally understood what it meant to treat kindness as malice. How much did those things cost? Qi Li was also angry, but there was no other way. Zhang Xueqi was like this, so she really couldn't say anything. After Zhang Yu and her husband came a few times, Zhang Yu and Zhang Xueqi gradually became familiar with each other. Once the two talked about heart disease. Zhang Yu said that heart disease was basically hereditary. Since Qi Li's father died of heart disease, maybe her mother had it too. If Zhang Hai was here, he would give her a big slap. How could a husband and wife pass on heart disease to each other? But Zhang Xueqi believed it. She told Zhang Xueqi that Digitalis could treat heart disease and asked her to give some to the old lady every day. If she didn't have any disease, she could just treat it as a precaution. Besides, it was Chinese medicine, so it was fine to put it in the food. If she was sick, it would be cured. If she wasn't sick, it would strengthen her body. After hearing her words, Zhang Xueqi quietly went out to ask around. After confirming that Digitalis could indeed treat heart disease, she bought some back. While she stopped using the ingredients from Zhang Hai's side, she gave the old lady some Digitalis when cooking. Of course, she also ate those things, but she was young. Qi Li's mother was already in her 50s. How could she compare with a young person? In addition, when she was eating porridge yesterday morning, Qi Yuanlong called her, crying. He told her that his son had been detained by someone when he went out to play with money. He would only let him go if he asked for 10 million. Otherwise he would kill him. This matter, coupled with the fact that she had eaten too much Digitalis, made the old lady very angry. This frightened Zhang Xueqi. She immediately called Qi Li. Then, the scene of Zhang Hai rushing back from Paris overnight happened. You really have good intentions but ended up doing bad things. Do you think that Zhang Hai's fishing ground and manor are the rivers in front of our house? Where did the heavy metal come from? If the heavy metal exceeded the limit, how could Zhang Hai sell it at such a high price? Foot and mouth disease? I really don't know what you're talking about. How could you believe Zhang Yu's words? Hearing Zhang Xueqi's words, Qi Li was really angry. But looking at the pitiful Zhang Xueqi, she didn't know what to say. She knew that this silly girl was being used by others. What could she say? Hearing Zhang Xue's words, Jiang Hai and the others remained silent. What Zhang Xue said was 99.9% likely to be true, but Zhang Yu was the one who instigated her. Jiang Hai and the others obviously couldn't do anything about it. First, this matter seemed to have nothing to do with her. She just moved her mouth. Second, the digitalis was not bought by her. She just said it casually. If this matter was reported to the heavens, Jiang Hai and the others could not do anything. But this guy almost killed Qi Li, Qi Jie, and Qi Ya's mother. This matter definitely couldn't be forgotten. I really can't take this lying down. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but punch the wall in front of him. Why don't we go? Looking at Jiang Hai, Azalina hesitated for a moment and said, since the law couldn't do anything, it was time for them to take action. But hearing her words, Jiang Hai shook his head. No, there are many people watching me and Qi Group in China now. The coverage of Sky Eyes in China is much higher than in the United States. If anything goes wrong, our team in China will be finished. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai said helplessly. He didn't care about the money he invested in Qi Group, but he knew how Qi Li's family felt about Qi Group. It was impossible for them to take Madame Qi and perish together with Zhang Yu. So for a while, the people in the corridor quieted down. Looking at everyone's expression, Jiang Hai was the first to shake his head and stand up. Forget it. Let's not think about it first. This matter can't end like this. Leave it to me. Let's go eat first. After eating, you guys figure out how to arrange the shifts here. If there's anything you need, tell me and I'll buy it. Staying here in silence was not a solution. Zhang Yu and Qi Yuanlong's family would definitely not let them go, but the problem was how to do it. This was still worth discussing. Looking at the haggard faces of Qi Li and her sisters, Jiang Hai clapped his hands. This was the time for men to stand up. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, everyone nodded. They were relieved to leave this matter to Jiang Hai. Thinking of this, Wallace Shelley, who was carrying the breakfast that Jiang Hai bought, also walked into the room with breakfast. Everyone also ate there. Halfway through, Qi Li's mother woke up. It seemed that today should be a good day. Chapter 1039. Hurry up. What are you two dawdling over there for? Standing in front of the wardrobe, Lu Yuanlong was fiddling with the tie of his suit with a smile on his face. His son and his wife were still sitting in the distance, not moving at all. Qi Yuanlong could understand that his son was not moving, but Zhang Yu, who used to be very active, was also silent at this time. What's going on? Why aren't you moving? Looking at the two, Qi Yuanlong frowned and said loudly, Tisk, why should I go see that old woman? Hearing Qi Yuanlong's words, Qi Zhengtao said unhappily, Don't mess around with me. Haven't you been miserable enough outside? How did you come back this time? Don't you know it in your heart? If you weren't the young master of the Qi family, would you be able to come back? When those people find out that you're not the young master of the Qi family, who do you expect to pay your 10 million gambling debt? Hearing Qi Zhengtao's words, Qi Yuanlong couldn't help but curse. Since being driven out of the Qi family, Qi Yuanlong's family really didn't have a good life. Although it was said that a starving camel was bigger than a horse, the problem was that the camel was already dead. The meat on its body would slowly rot, but the meat on a horse's body would slowly grow as it ate. Ever since they left the Qi family, they had nothing but some money in their hands. During the new year, they went to the Qi family to make a scene, but it was useless. Instead, they completely offended Jiang Hai. After coming back, Qi Yuanlong felt that they couldn't just sit around and eat. In fact, their family was still rich, but they could spend 1 million a day in the past. Now they could only spend 10,000 a day. Naturally, he felt that the gap in his heart was too big. So he thought about it and prepared to save the country in a roundabout way. First, he made a connection with Qi Li's mother, and then through Qi Li's mother, he could find Qi Li and Jiang Hai. With her mother's relationship, even if he couldn't let them go back to their previous life, he could still give them some money to drink soup. After all, he was her biological uncle. That was why he always brought Zhang Yu to Qi Li's house. Zhang Yu also behaved very well. Gradually, the relationship between the two families became closer. He didn't know what had happened yesterday. After making a phone call, he was suddenly hung up. At night, he found out from his friend in the hospital that his sister-in-law was hospitalized and Zhang Hai and Qi Li were back. He rolled his eyes. To him, this was a good idea to flatter his sister-in-law. Therefore, he asked his whole family to go to the hospital to see his sister-in-law. However, his son and daughter-in-law obviously didn't think so. I was originally the young master of the Qi family. Those assets were originally mine. Zhang Hai and Qi Li, that be *tch, only stole my things. Now you want me to beg them to give me food to eat. Dad, where's your backbone? Looking at Qi Yuanlong, Qi Zhengtao straightened his neck and roared loudly. Hearing his words, Qi Zhengtao didn't know what to say now. This was because he was really a little speechless. This was what he had taught Qi Zhengtao since he was a child. Qi Zhengtao said that the Qi family was passed down to males and not females. The 3 daughters of his uncle's family would all be married off in the future. This huge Qi family would be his in the future and so on. Qi Zhengtao believed Qi Yuanlong's words. In addition, Qi Li's grandfather and grandmother favored boys over girls. If they were still alive, it might be very troublesome for Qi Li to take over the Qi family. However, the problem now was that Qi Li was the master of the Qi family. Qi Zhengtao couldn't understand the situation, and Qi Yuanlong had nothing to say about it. He really had nothing to say. What about you? What are you doing? Looking at his son who straightened his neck, Qi Yuanlong sighed and looked at Zhang Yu. Well, there might be something that I want to tell you. Seeing Qi Yuanlong looking over, Zhang Yu smiled awkwardly. What's the matter? Looking at her face, Qi Yuanlong frowned. He had a feeling that something might be wrong. It's like this. You know, when we went to the Qi family's mansion, I would help that little girl, Zhang Xueqi, cook or something. At first, I talked about Zhang Hai and said that his beef and fish were not good, and Zhang Xueqi believed me. Later, I was also a person who didn't guard the door, so I said that digitalis could cure heart diseases. My elder brother had a heart attack, so maybe my sister-in-law had it too. After I came back, I checked and found out that heart diseases are not contagious between husband and wife, and if you eat too much digitalis, it's easy to have a heart attack. Looking at Qi Yuanlong, Zhang Yu whispered, but her voice became softer and softer as she spoke. Hearing Zhang Yu's words, Qi Yuanlong's head buzzed. He had a friend in the hospital who tipped him off, so he naturally knew what happened to his sister-in-law. She had a heart attack. Originally, he thought it was a natural disaster, but now it seemed that it might be a man-made disaster. How did you? God, what should I do now? His vision turned black, and Qi Yuanlong sat on the ground, but he was not in the mood to relax at this time. Because this stinky woman's mouth did not guard the door, this time all his previous efforts were wasted. Thinking of this, Qi Yuanlong's face suddenly turned red. After getting up from the ground, he ran in front of Zhang Yu and gave him a big slap. His plan was ruined because of this guy. His family was finished. It's useless for you to hit me. Even if you kill me, will sister-in-law's illness be cured? Covering her face, Zhang Yu did not dare to fight back. She could only look at Qi Yuanlong pitifully and shout loudly. That's right, Dad. Why did you hit Auntie Zhang? I think Auntie you did a good job. At this time, Qi Zhengtao also said with a smile. Hearing his son's words, Qi Yuanlong glared at him. Was this something he should say? Those people who stole my things are all dead. Dad, if Qi Li's family is all dead, who will the Qi group belong to? Looking at his father's glare, Qi Zhengtao did not care. He was still sitting on the sofa and said with a smile. How dare you have such an idea? Hearing his words, Qi Yuanlong was also angry and shouted loudly. What's the big deal? Those things were originally mine. They stole my things, and now I'm just asking them to return it to me. If they don't return it, I can only use some violent means. What's more, Zhang Hai is now the head of the Qi family. Zhang Hai is a ruthless and black-hearted guy. You don't need me to remind you. Dad, if he knew that this was done by Auntie Yu, would he let it go? Indeed. Auntie Yu just moved her mouth. Even if she goes to court, she won't win. But do you think he won't use some underhanded means? Looking at Qi Yuanlong's expression, Qi Zhengtao was not afraid. Instead, he sat there with a smile and said indifferently. Hearing his son's words, Qi Yuanlong's originally angry expression gradually calmed down. Obviously, he was also thinking about it. Indeed, as Qi Zhengtao said, if Qi Li's family was all dead, who would the Qi group belong to? Although Qi Song was his elder brother, he was still his cousin. There was no doubt that he was the first heir. Regardless of Zhang Hai's things, thinking about the current market value of the Qi group, it was impossible to say that he was not tempted. At that time he would have money, power and everything. He might have a chance to succeed. What do you think? Hearing Qi Zhengtao's words, Qi Yuanlong looked at him and said with a serious face. If Zhang Hai had stayed in the United States and Qi Li had stayed in the capital, maybe I wouldn't have many ways. But now that they are in Bingqing, I can let them know what it means to be far away from the emperor. Hearing that his father was about to compromise, Qi Zhengtao also said with a smile on his face. Of course, Zhang Hai didn't know this at this time. But even if he knew, he would probably just laugh. What a joke. Who were the martial artists on Zhang Hai's side now? Not to mention Zhang Hai, who had 8 times the physical fitness of the human limit, Azalina, who was one of the 12 strongest people in a European spy agency, Wallace Shelley, and Du Ning, who were all first-class masters. Not to mention that the people Qi Zhengtao found were at most some ruffians. Even if he found special forces and professional killers, it was impossible for them to be opponents of these 4 people. If 1 came, they would kill 1. If 2 came, they would kill a pair. If 10 came, they would alert the central government. Would he dare? Having said that, after learning that the mastermind behind the scenes was Zhang Yu, Zhang Hai and Qi Li also discussed it together. From today onwards, Qi Li's mother's meals would be taken care of by Qi Ya. Qi Jie and Qi Li would take turns to take care of Qi Li's mother. Every day during the day, Zhang Hai would come over to see if there was anything he could help with. At the same time, he would think of ways to deal with Zhang Yu and Qi Yuanlong's family. Between Azalina and Du Ning, one was responsible for staying in the ward, and the other was responsible for staying in Qi Li's house. If Qi Ya wanted to come over to deliver food, she would drive. As for Wallace Shelley, she had to collect all the information at home. As for Zhang Xueqi, although she was only used by others and did bad things out of kindness, she was not allowed to go out for the next few days. As for other punishment, it was unlikely that they would use other measures. Qi Li's mother sincerely treated her as a daughter, and Qi Li and the others also sincerely treated her as a sister. Naturally, they could not send her to prison. They could not beat her up, so they could only leave her at home. The best result now was that she did not cause trouble. At the same time, Zhang Hai immediately called Ai Xiaoxi and asked her to send a batch of beef and fish back to Bing City. These were their rations. After all the division of labor was completed, Zhang Hai also breathed a sigh of relief. At least he did not need to worry about safety now. As for how to deal with Zhang Yu and Qi Yuanlong, to be honest, he was still confused. Chapter 1040. Puff. After wiping the water off his face, Zhang Hai let out a sigh of relief. Looking at the guys who were soaking in the pool in the distance, Zhang Hai walked over and slowly walked into the huge warm pool. After sitting in, Zhang Hai couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, he covered his forehead with a towel. When Zhang Hai returned to Bingqing, it was naturally impossible for him not to play with his little friends. When he came out to play, he had to take a bath. Zhang Hai liked to take a bath, especially with some of his friends. Of course, Zhang Hai didn't come here just to take a bath. In his manor, there was a natural hot spring. There were not many bathhouses in China that could be compared to his natural hot spring, especially in Bingqing, where there were no hot springs. Zhang Hai came to the bathhouse to take a bath, but more importantly, there was someone to give him a bath. However, that had to wait for a while. After sitting down, Zhang Hai watched the TV in front of him while feeling that the hot water was dispelling his fatigue. When are you going to leave this time? Looking at Zhang Hai, Fu Yuan turned around and asked him. I don't know. I guess it will take at least a month. After all, my mother-in-law's condition is not very good. If she wants to have surgery, a month is the minimum. With his eyes half closed, Zhang Hai estimated. In fact, with the nourishment of his spiritual energy, it didn't matter whether the heart bypass surgery was done or not. However, this was Hua Xia, and Zhang Hai didn't want to expose too many things. The heart bypass surgery could be done without, but it had to be done slowly. Moreover, Zhang Yu and Qi Yuanlong's family were waiting for him to deal with. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Su Wei, who was next to him, sighed and said, "When people get older, they will have more diseases. In addition, the temperature difference here is big. When winter and spring come, it is indeed easy to cause cardiovascular and cerebrovascular diseases." Not long ago, his grandmother had just passed away. It was also around this time, but she had passed away peacefully. She had passed away when she was sleeping at home. Hung was over 80 years old. This could be considered a good death. After all, in ancient times, there was a saying, people should die at home and not in the hospital or other places. Otherwise, it would be considered a violent death. But now, no one cared about this. After all, when people passed away, they would be cremated. Even their bodies could not be preserved. But in Bing City, it was winter and spring, and most of the old people passed away. Have you ever thought of moving your mother-in-law to another place to live? Hearing Su Wei's words, Fu Yuan nodded and asked Zhang Hai. But after hearing his words, Zhang Hai looked at him like he was an idiot. There were only two places to take his mother-in-law away. One was Qi Li's place. There was no need to consider this. Everyone knew the quality of the air in the capital. If his mother-in-law went there, she might die even faster. Some people said that things like smog were a product of industrial progress. It was unavoidable, and those developed countries would only have heavier smog. Indeed, this was true. If you look at the newspaper 40 years ago, you will find that the newspaper in the 70s did indeed report the extremely serious problem of smog in the United States. Yes, smog also appeared during the development of the United States. But the United States was different from Huaxia. In Huaxia, the rich had the final say. When the rich felt that it was going to be over, they forced the government to improve the environment. After 40 years, everyone knew that smog was no longer in the United States. Of course, the air in some large industrial cities may not be good, such as New York and Detroit, but at least after leaving the city, the air was quite good, such as Winthrop. But Huaxia was different. As for how different it was, in order to prevent Zhang Hai from disappearing, there was no need to explain. Of course, different countries had different advantages. For example, China was much better than the United States in some aspects. During last year's presidential election in the United States, the current candidate said that the infrastructure of the United States was like that of a third world country. This was not a joke. The public transportation in the United States was almost only by car and plane. First, it was because gasoline was cheap. Second, it was because there were no tolls. But to be honest, driving was very tiring, so most people chose to take a plane. However, taking a plane required checking in, going to the airport, and waiting. Compared to a plane, trains were much more convenient. But the trains in the United States. Haha. Huaxia's high-speed rail might not be the best in the world, but it was definitely one of the top 3. It was fast, stable, and the ticket price was very affordable. If you were used to taking high-speed rail in China, it would be hard to get used to going to the United States. This was because the trains in the United States were really slow. There were also high-speed rail in the United States. The speed was faster than trains and cars, but not by much. Most importantly, the price would make you feel that it was better to buy a plane. In the United States, the ticket price for a cross-state high-speed rail was more than $150, which was more than 1,000 RMB. This was only for the cross-state high-speed rail. If you were to cross a few states, it would cost more than $200 or $300. It was very expensive. Other than high-speed rail, the basic subway in the cities was not very good in the United States. Take New York, the largest city in the United States, as an example. If you were to walk around New York City, there were no escalators at all. People had to walk up and down the subway. Of course, there were some places that had them, but most of them did not. In China, after getting off the subway, you would see a row of automatic ticket vending machines. 4 to 5 of them were the basic ones, and there were also places that sold tickets manually. But in New York, there were only 3 ticket vending machines. One of them only accepted coins, and one of them was a place that was similar to the United States. Only one of them was operating normally. So, you would often see long queues at the automatic ticket vending machines during working hours. The only advantage was that there was no need for security checks. But for some people who were afraid of death, they did not feel safe without security checks. There was another difference between the United States and Huaxia. Online payment was rare in the United States. For example, Alipay was rare in the United States, but it was not very useful. When you are eating or shopping, you can swipe your card or pay with cash. But Alipay was rarely used. The United States and Europe's capitalist countries mostly rely on cash to circulate in society. If people have money but don't spend it, how can they live? They rely on these things to make money. However, the situation within the country was a little different. The country had the final say, not the capitalists. They needed to keep more money in the bank and use it for construction instead of printing money. Everyone knew what inflation was. It was the printing of too much money. Huaxia had always been very cautious in this regard. They had been controlling all the exchange rates. Once the exchange rate between USD and RMB was low, it would be suppressed at around 6 p.m. When the exchange rate was about 5 renminbi, the exchange rate would rise to 7 renminbi again. This was very important to ensure the foreign exchange rate. That was why virtual currencies were so popular in China. Who had not used WeChat to transfer money? Who had not used Alipay to pay for meals? It seemed that the money was still your money, and it was very convenient. But the government's money in the bank could not be used. For the government, it was just a matter of left hand to right hand. Well, the topic had digressed. In short, Jiang Hai's mother-in-law could not go to Beijing. Then go to Jiang Hai's place? Ha 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 ha. Other than laughing awkwardly, there was no other adjective. Go there for what? See how messed up her son-in-law was? Stop joking. That was why Jiang Hai looked at Fu Yuan as if he was an idiot. Fu Yuan also felt that he had said something wrong and laughed awkwardly. After soaking for a while, the three went to take a bath. After rubbing the mud off their bodies, they added bath salts and went to the sauna to steam themselves. Jiang Hai and the others also came out after washing themselves. However, they didn't rush to go back. Instead, they went upstairs to steam themselves. At the same time, they massaged their feet. Don't get it wrong, it wasn't a sword or anything like that. It was just a normal massage. After everything was done, Jiang Hai and the others also left the bath center. Because they had just finished rubbing the skewers before taking a bath, they didn't want to meet up again. They just went back directly. Jiang Hai also went to the side of his flashy red Ferrari. He had no choice. The Qi family only had 3 cars in Bing City. A Rolls-Royce was the main car, and it was left in the main house. There was also a BMW, which was left in the hospital. If anyone had anything to do in the hospital, they could use it. The last car was Qi Li's Ferrari, so Jiang Hai had to go back and drive it. Fortunately, Jiang Hai could also drive the red Ferrari. Anyway, he did not need this car to pick up girls. After chatting for a while, the 3 of them got into their respective cars, started the engine, and went back to their homes. While driving, Jiang Hai was also thinking about how to solve the problem. But just as Jiang Hai was thinking, a person suddenly appeared from the side of the road and directly lay down 20 meters in front of Jiang Hai's car. F***CK. Looking at the person who suddenly appeared, Jiang Hai could not help but step on the brakes. This car was indeed a good car. Originally, Jiang Hai was not driving very fast. After sliding forward for 4 or 5 meters, he stopped. The person saw that Jiang Hai had stopped a little far away and was still moving towards him. Looking at the person's actions on the dashboard, Jiang Hai could not help but laugh. Then, he took out his mobile phone and prepared to call the police. What else was there to say? Chapter 1041. However, just as Jiang Hai was about to make a phone call, a group of people suddenly rushed out from the grass in the distance. This group of people seemed to have more than 20 people. They were all carrying some wooden blocks, pipes, and the like in their hands. They surrounded him aggressively. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai didn't have to think to know what these people meant. At the moment, Jiang Hai was not polite. Although he didn't know who wanted to scheme against him, he was sure that these people were targeting him. There was no need to say anything at the moment. Jiang Hai put the car in gear and was ready to go directly, but when he looked back, he found that a van behind him was rushing directly toward him. It seemed that these people were ready to kill him. There was a van blocking the road behind. There were people lying in front of him to blackmail him. There were also people surrounding him. Needless to say, the police must have arranged it. If he rushed directly and killed people, he would definitely be arrested. It seemed like these people had planned for him in great detail. But if they really want to fight, then Zhang Hai didn't care. There were no guns in China. Without guns, these rotten sweet potatoes and stinky eggs want to deal with him? Hee hee. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai turned on the camera function in his glasses, then pushed open the door and walked out. Oh, you dare to come out. I thought you had to be a coward inside. Seeing Zhang Hai walk out, the van over there also stopped, and 6 or 7 people came down from it. Among these people, there was a fat man wearing a big gold chain and a pair of sunglasses even in the dark. He looked at Zhang Hai and grinned, saying with a smile, "Coward? Hee hee, if you touch my car, I have to repair it. It's very troublesome." Hearing this man's words, Zhang Hai chuckled, and then said to him indifferently, "Hee hee, I guess you don't have a chance to repair it. Go. Let's beat him up first." Hearing Zhang Hai's understatement, the fat man waved his hand. There were almost 40 underlings inside and outside, all of them rushing over while cursing. However, Zhang Hai just chuckled. He flashed in front of a person and deliberately let his hand graze him. Then Zhang Hai directly punched him. The huge impact directly smashed the man's nose into his face. At the same time, his body was like a sandbag, directly hitting the people behind him and knocking them down. But Zhang Hai didn't stop at this time. He turned to the other side and dodged an iron pipe from the man in front of him. Zhang Hai's leg swept directly on the man's stomach. This kick directly kicked the man in the air. His eyes and tongue bulged out. When he fell to the ground, he had lost his combat power. Zhang Hai had already jumped over this guy and flashed into the crowd behind him. Zhang Hai's combat power was extremely strong. In addition, he had received professional training. How could these unorthodox people be his opponents? Zhang Hai was like a tiger in a flock of sheep. Many of them were knocked down. Although they all had weapons in their hands, they couldn't resist Zhang Hai's fists, feet, elbows and knees. They really lost their combat power when they were hit. It was normal for their bones to be broken. In a flash, 1/3 of this small group of about 40 people had lost their combat power because of Zhang Hai. They either fainted directly or lay on the ground screaming while holding their stomachs, arms, and legs. It was said that the soft feared the hard feared the tyrannical, and the tyrannical feared those who didn't care about their lives. Zhang Hai wasn't someone who didn't care about his life, it was just that his strength was too high, so high that these people had no way to imagine it. Therefore, the remaining 20 or so people hesitated at this time, including those gangsters who were overwhelmed by that person at the beginning. They saw with their own eyes the miserable state of the first person who was beaten by Zhang Hai. It was estimated that he would definitely not be able to survive in the future. Therefore, these people were now afraid. They were very hesitant to move forward. What are you afraid of? He is only one person. We will tire him to death. Take out your weapons. Fatty, who was hiding at the back of the crowd, saw this situation and roared loudly. Hearing his words, these people also threw away the water pipes, wooden blocks, and the like in their hands, and then took out flashing switchblades from their pockets. Seeing that these people still dared to use sharp weapons, Zhang Hai smiled. In that case, he would leave a deep impression on them. Seeing these people rushing over with switchblades, Zhang Hai used his foot to pick up 2 water pipes. Then, he hit them like a storm. The water pipes were metal, not plastic. This kind of iron pipe could directly break a person's head if it was used by ordinary people, not to mention Zhang Hai. In an instant, those iron pipes fell on these people like raindrops. But unlike raindrops, when these iron pipes fell, they were bound to break bones, whether it was the head, the shoulders, or the chest. Zhang Hai alone suppressed more than 20 people and beat them up. These people did not expect Zhang Hai to be so violent. The 5 or 6 people who rushed up in front were instantly smashed to the ground by Zhang Hai. Looking at their sunken heads or obviously bent arms and shoulders, these people were afraid again. In a street fight like this, courage was the most important. These people were not soldiers. They had no faith. They only bullied the weak and feared the strong. It was not easy to use the knife to build up their courage, but at this time, it was all gone. Some of the people at the back who were originally timid kept retreating. But even if they retreated, Zhang Hai did not mean to let them go. He still fought all the way. Bang, 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 bang. The sound of the water pipes hitting the flesh stimulated Jiang Hai's blood and inspired the fear of these people. No one knew who was the first to scream, but that person quickly ran back, and the rest of the people followed suit. But if you ran, Jiang Hai would not let you go. Don't chase a cornered enemy? This sentence did not apply to Jiang Hai. After going up, they still fought. When Jiang Hai killed his way to the van, there were only 2 people left. One was the fat man, and the other was the van driver. The fat man was completely dumbfounded at this time. In the past, he had only heard that one person could fight against 100 people. He just smiled disdainfully and thought that it was all nonsense. How could there be such a terrifying person in this world? One person could fight against 100 people? One person could not even fight against 10 people, okay? But today, Jiang Hai taught him a lesson. Although he did not fight against 100 people today, there were more than 40 people. Now, all of them were lying on the ground. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive, or they were holding their injured parts and screaming. This scene was like a scene from hell. The fat man and the driver were completely frightened at this time. They stood there and did not know what to do. But Jiang Hai was not going to be polite. He went up with a stick and directly smashed the fat man's right hand. The fat man also screamed like a pig being slaughtered. Say, what happened today? Another iron pipe was placed in front of the fat man's left hand, and Jiang Hai said calmly, I don't know. Covering his right hand, the fat man was still preparing to be stubborn, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai's iron pipe had already come down. With another bang, the fat man's left hand also hung down unconsciously. With both hands broken, the fat man could only scream powerlessly. Jiang Hai did not mean to ask again. He picked up the iron pipe again, and with 2 more bangs, the fat man's legs were also broken in an instant. His whole body lay powerlessly on the cold asphalt road. His screams had already made his throat hoarse. The next stick will hit your head. Whether you die or not depends on your luck. Now, I will ask you for the second time. What happened? Looking at the fat man, Jiang Hai stepped on his head with his foot. While grinding his head hard, he said to the fat man, I really don't know. I am Brother Zhao's subordinate. Big brother, I have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Big brother, let this little brother go. Hearing that Jiang Hai was going to smash his head directly, the fat man was really scared. At the same time, there was a smell of urine on his pants, and he also spoke intermittently. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was happy. I don't have *King know any Brother Zhao at all. You came to find trouble with me for no reason? You want to use this reason to dismiss me? Looking at the fat man, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed, and the iron pipe was directly knocked over. In an instant, it hit the fat man's head. In an instant, the fat man no longer screamed because he had fainted. Then Jiang Hai raised his foot and looked at the driver in the distance. The driver knelt down in an instant. Big brother, I am only responsible for driving. They originally asked me to hit your car. You see, I didn't hit your car. This has nothing to do with me, big brother. By the way, I may know who wants to deal with you. Looking at Jiang Hai, the driver slapped his mouth and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's eyebrows also raised. I am Brother Zhao's driver. I remember this afternoon, a person surnamed Qi came to look for Brother Zhao. That person surnamed Qi owes Brother Zhao 10 million yuan. I don't know what they said, but Brother Zhao arranged this tonight. It really has nothing to do with me, big brother. Looking at Jiang Hai's eyes, the man also shouted loudly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also frowned. Suddenly, he thought of a person and a matter in his mind. It seemed that Du Ning, Qi Li, or Zhang Xiaoa had said that on the morning of his mother-in-law's hospitalization, Qi Yuanlong had called his mother-in-law and said that Qi Zhengtao was detained by others. 10 million yuan, surnamed Qi. Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed. It seems that the person behind this has been found. Chapter 1042. Woo 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 woo. The alarm rang. Hearing the alarm, the driver fell to the ground weakly. He knew that he had survived. Jiang Hai took out his mobile phone and called Qi Li and Azalina. He called Qi Li to protect himself with legal weapons. These people dared to directly dispatch 40 people to block him on the street, saying that they didn't have a protective umbrella. Zhang Hai himself didn't believe it. In the country, officials were the most important. No matter how rich a person was, they were just fat sheep in the eyes of the officials. This was also the reason why Zhang Hai had never considered doing business in the country. Because if he didn't do well, his own business would become someone else's. Moreover, his family would be ruined and his family would be destroyed. This old saying wasn't a joke. Without thinking, he knew that the first batch of policemen must have something to do with these people. Zhang Hai couldn't escape, because if he did, he would be in trouble. Therefore, he called Qi Li and asked her to find a lawyer to take responsibility. He called Azalina so that she and Wallace Shelley could find Brother Zhao. Although they didn't know whether the person behind this was Qi Yuanlong or Qi Zhongtao, Brother Zhao definitely knew. This father and son were digging their own graves. If they gave Zhang Hai something that could be used against them, would Zhang Hai still be polite? They thought too much. After the call, the policemen came over. When they saw the scene, all of them gasped. After seeing them, Zhang Hai also threw the iron pipe on the ground and lay on the ground. The policemen cooperated and detained Zhang Hai and the driver. As for the others, they were naturally sent to the hospital. Then the policemen escorted Zhang Hai and the driver to the police station. They didn't speak along the way. When they arrived at the police station, all of Zhang Hai's belongings were found, including his ID card, passport, green card, mobile phone, keys, and so on. Then he was handcuffed in the interrogation room. However, these policemen were not good people. They didn't tie Zhang Hai to the chair. Instead, they tied him to the heating pipe next to Zhang Hai so that he couldn't stand up or squat down. This was also a very common method. However, Zhang Hai hadn't been handcuffed for 5 minutes when 2 policemen came in and handcuffed Zhang Hai to the chair. They were ready to interrogate him. Needless to say, this should be Qi Li starting to exert her power. Although Qi Li was stunned when she heard that her mother had fainted, she was still a strong woman. But don't forget, she was an out-and-out strong woman. As soon as she received Zhang Hai's call, she called the headquarters directly and directly used the Qi family's name to put pressure on the Ministry of Public Security in the capital. She even alarmed the National Security Bureau. After all, Zhang Hai was also on the list there. After the Ministry of Public Security received the news, they were really confused. What did the police mean by detaining the biggest shareholder of the Qi Group? One had to know that Zhang Hai was only detained in a city. Although Bing City was a provincial capital, there was still the District Public Security Bureau, the Municipal Public Security Bureau, the Provincial Public Security Bureau, and then the ministry. Petitioning from 4 different levels was really asking for too much. But this was the Qi Group. After all, the capital was under the control of the emperor. The Qi Group's power was quite solid there. No officials dared to commit crimes there. This was different from the emperor in Bing City. Moreover, Zhang Hai's identity was important enough. Therefore, after knowing this, the head of the Ministry of Public Security directly called the Provincial Public Security Bureau. The head of the Provincial Public Security Bureau directly called the Municipal Public Security Bureau. The people from the Municipal Public Security Bureau directly skipped the district level and called the police station. They scolded the police station without saying anything. At least, they had to let the people in the police station know who they were arresting. After learning about this situation, the head of the police station was also shocked. While he was cursing Brother Zhao in his heart, he was also a little afraid that this matter would implicate him. But now that the arrow was on the bow, he had no choice but to shoot. Even so, there was no need to think about putting on a show of strength or using violence. The other party's identity was there. If he lost even a strand of hair, his political career would be over. Therefore, he immediately sent people over to interrogate him. There was nothing else he could do. Name. The 2 policemen who came to interrogate Zhang Hai were a middle-aged man who looked a little powerful, and the other was a man who looked about 30 years old. The 2 of them took Zhang Hai off the heating pipe and handcuffed him to the chair. After that, they turned on the video and started the interrogation. But unfortunately, after they finished their questioning, Zhang Hai did not speak. Boy, we are asking you. Name. The policeman in his 30s knocked on the table and said angrily, "Before my lawyer comes, I won't speak." Hearing this man's words, Zhang Hai smiled, and then said very indifferently. As the old saying goes, the word official has 2 mouths, both inside and outside. There is also an old saying that the entrance of the yamen is facing the south. If you have reason but no money, don't come in. Although Zhang Hai has reason and money, if these two mouths are not polite to him, black and white are not things that Zhang Hai has never heard of. In order to prevent Zhang Hai from inexplicably disappearing, there are some things that he will not say too clearly. Lawyer. You have watched too many Hong Kong movies. Where did you get a lawyer? Hearing what Zhang Hai said, the middle-aged policeman here said with a look of disdain, but as soon as his voice fell, there was a noise outside. Then the door of the interrogation room was pushed open, and a captain of the police station was bowing and accompanying a man in a suit. After the man walked in, he saw Zhang Hai, who was handcuffed there. Hello, you must be Mr. Zhang. Seeing Zhang Hai sitting here, the man in black immediately walked over with a smile. He wanted to shake hands with Zhang Hai, but he found that Zhang Hai was handcuffed, and his face was a little ugly. Hello, my name is Chen Zhengwen. I belong to the legal department of the Qi family, and I am also your current lawyer. I would like to ask everyone, what law did my client commit and why he is handcuffed here? Looking at the people in front of him, the lawyer named Chen Zhengwen said with a serious face. Hearing his words, the policemen next to him looked at each other. It was hard to say. He is suspected of participating in a European fight, so he is detained by us. At this time, the old policeman looked at the lawyer calmly and said, this was not wrong. Zhang Hai did get into a fight. Okay, I request to sit in on the interrogation. Hearing the other party's reason, and it seemed to be irrefutable, the lawyer here did not care. Instead, he stood directly beside Zhang Hai and said calmly. Hearing his words, the two people on the other side also looked at the captain who opened the door and came in. The captain just smiled and then left. What a joke. He and those people were not in the same group. He didn't need to be buried with those guys. They heard that Zhang Hai had already alerted the Ministry of Public Security, and the Municipal Bureau and the Provincial Bureau were now sending people over. This small police station could not suppress him. At this time, if he did not choose to protect himself, then he was crazy. Seeing that the captain did not care and left, the two people here could not help but feel a little headache, but they could only bite the bullet and ask Zhang Hai. But this time, Zhang Hai answered very straightforwardly. With the lawyer here, he was not afraid of what traps they would set for him. Zhang Hai also explained his own situation and what happened tonight. At the same time, he also provided evidence, which was the image recorded by his glasses, to prove that he was indeed normal self-defense. Although the two policemen wanted to ask him, how did you beat 38 people to the hospital in normal self-defense? Among them, 23 were seriously injured, 14 were slightly injured, and 1 was destined to be disabled. It was the fat leader. The only one who was unscathed was the driver, but he was also scared out of his wits. But they could not say this, because they did not care why Zhang Hai was so powerful. The two pieces of evidence, the camera in the car and Zhang Hai's glasses, could not be faked. These people did stop Zhang Hai first, then surrounded Zhang Hai and prepared to attack him. If there was no lawyer here, they might be vague about who attacked first and decide this matter as an attack. But now that there was a lawyer here, they could not say that. They could only finish the statement quickly. In the meantime, the people from the Provincial Bureau and the Municipal Bureau had arrived and took over the case. With Zhang Hai's special identity, he had such power. After there was no problem with the statement, Zhang Hai also signed. Because he was a victim, he could leave. Mr. Zhang, how are you going to solve this incident? As they walked out, the lawyer asked Zhang Cheng in a low voice how this matter should be solved. Of course, it was up to Zhang Hai to decide. If it was a strict investigation, it would have to be reduced to a small matter. It was all up to Zhang Hai to decide. After moving his wrist that was cuffed to some pain, Zhang Hai smiled. Reduced to a small matter? How was that possible? Sue them for kidnapping, murder, robbery. Oh yes, and also for racketeering. Glancing at the lawyer, Zhang Hai said indifferently. When he heard Zhang Hai's words, the lawyer also nodded. He understood what Zhang Hai meant. It was to torture them to death. I understand. Looking at Zhang Hai, the lawyer smiled calmly. He knew that this matter was also a proof of loyalty from Zhang Hai and the Qi family. If he handled it well, then he did not need to think too much about his future. Chapter 1043. Zhao Chen, you bastard. Are you trying to kill me? King bastard, come out. In the wee hours of the morning in Bingqing, before the sun came out, a man in casual clothes barged into a high-end clubhouse. After walking in, he began to shout loudly. This clubhouse also had some reputation in Bingqing. Usually, it was a place where some small stars, rich second generations and the like played all night. It could be said that there was everything you wanted to play here. But even so, it was time for those who had played all night to rest. Hearing someone shouting, some people came out cursing. But when they saw that the security guards in the distance didn't dare to move, they shrank their heads back. After a while, a man in casual clothes slowly walked down the stairs. This man looked like he was 35 or 36 years old. His hair was meticulously combed, and he even had a beard. He looked a little like the boss of the Axe Gang in Zhou Xingxing's Kung Fu movie, but he was more handsome and had a good figure. At this moment, he was wearing a black shirt and trousers, walking over from afar with a smile on his face. If someone was in Bingqing at this time, it would not be difficult to recognize that this person's name was Zhao Chen. Compared to those people in the underworld who were either called Hu, Long or Zhao, this person played much more high-end games. This person used to be a retired Special Forces soldier. After returning from the military, he followed a boss. However, because he was handsome and had a good figure, he had an affair with the boss's woman. After the boss found out, he took the initiative to kill the boss. His sister-in-law controlled all of the boss's money, so the two of them directly recruited people and bought horses. After taking over the former boss's territory, with money to clear the way, and training a group of thugs according to a professional method, he gradually gained some reputation. However, after gaining some reputation, he restrained his business and opened this entertainment club. It was a place specially for the rich to pass time. Gambling, dogfighting, finding the most professional women who had lost their footing, and so on. This place was the best, so many rich second-generation officials, and celebrities liked to come here to play. After so many years, he had gradually become a very influential existence in this area. As for this Chief Lu, he was under the jurisdiction of the City Public Security Bureau. He couldn't say. Anyway, it was related to him. This time, he was in charge of arresting Jiang Hai. But now, he was probably panicking. Chief Lu, it's still early in the morning. I'm not open for business yet. Looking at the middle-aged man in front of him, the man on the other side chuckled. Upon hearing his words, Chief Lu's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Business? Run your King business. You coward. How dare you play with me? That Jiang Hai, what's going on? Chief Lu pointed at this person and yelled at him with a face full of anger. Nothing much. Just an ordinary nouveau riche. Hearing this person's words, Zhao Chen, who was in front of him, also smiled. It was not his first day in this world, so he naturally knew that there were some people he could never provoke. Therefore, he usually smiled at anyone. If he did not investigate the other party's background clearly, he would not make a move. Jiang Hai's background was very easy to investigate. Since young, he had been an ordinary loser. When he was young, he was not good at his studies. His parents died early, and later, he just stayed at home. Although there were rumors that he was married to the eldest daughter of the Qi family. However, according to his understanding, that eldest miss had never taken her seriously. If she took him seriously, he should have stayed in the capital and not Bing City. Later on, he heard that 3 years ago, he went to the United States and started raising cattle. Maybe he earned some money from raising cattle? However, in his eyes, they were just ordinary nouveau riche. Nouveau riche? I'll break your legs. Nouveau riche is the biggest shareholder of the Qi family? Nouveau riche can alarm the Public Security Bureau. Nouveau riche can let the Provincial Department and the City Public Security Bureau take over the case after an hour. And investigate thoroughly? Look at the crimes of your subordinates. Robbery, murder, kidnapping. You're telling me that he's a nouveau riche. Hearing Zhao Chen's words, Chief Lu instantly exploded. As he jumped, he pointed at his nose and scolded. After hearing what he said, a trace of surprise flashed across Zhao Chen's face, but he quickly covered it up. Let me tell you. The person you're looking for trouble with is called Jiang Hai. His small ranch is worth tens of billions of dollars. He does business directly with a country. He has business dealings with Europe, the Middle East, Australia, South Korea, Japan, and even Xia. Even the imperial court has to beg him to do things. You're telling me that he's a nouveau riche? Hee, let me tell you, if I'm finished, you'll die too. Your whole family will die. Chief Lu looked at Zhao Chen and pointed at him as he spoke. There's no need to be so anxious. No matter how strong he is, his forces are all overseas. Even if he has them in the country, they're in the imperial capital. A strong dragon can't suppress a local snake. I have plenty of ways to settle this matter. You can rest assured and go back to be Chief Lu. If anything happens, you don't have to do anything. I'll send my head up myself. You're courting death. Seeing Zhao Chen's confident look, Chief Lu had no other choice but to believe him. After pointing at him, he turned around and left. If others saw him entering and leaving such a place, it would be troublesome. After Chief Lu left, Zhao Chen still had a smile on his face as he walked into his room. However, as soon as he entered the room, he slumped to the ground. His calmness just now was all an act. He never thought that he would actually offend such a big shot. The cause of the matter was all because of Qi Zhengtao. After Qi Song and Qi Zhengtao caused trouble in the first month, only Qi Zhengtao's wife, Lu Si, returned to the Qi family to work. Qi Zhengtao's family stayed in Bingqing. They had nothing to do when they returned to the imperial capital, right? As for Qi Zhengtao, without his wife to control him, he was even more free. All day long, he went to some high-class clubs with a group of bad friends. He often came to this entertainment club, but in the past, he was only lustful and didn't gamble. Although being lustful was harmful to the body, compared to the other two of the three poisons, it wasn't that expensive. Even if it was a high-class girl, it would only cost 30,000 to 50,000 yuan a night, including alcohol. He could afford it. Moreover, after playing once, he would definitely sober up the next day, so he wouldn't be able to play the next day. On the third day, he might be a little lightheaded and wouldn't be able to play. At most, he would only play twice a week. For Qi Yuanlong's family, spending 60,000 to 70,000 yuan a week wasn't a big deal. However, recently, Qi Zhengtao might have wanted to play more excitedly and got involved in gambling. That was troublesome. This thing was big. Sometimes, he would throw in a handful of 100,000 or 80,000 yuan. However, he couldn't take out Qi Yuanlong's money. Slowly, over the past few months, he owed this entertainment club 10 million yuan. After playing the night before yesterday, he was detained here by Zhao Chen. Of course, he didn't beat or scold him. He only called Qi Yuanlong. Only then did Qi Yuanlong find out that his son was involved in gambling. He explained that he was a shareholder of the Qi family, and that his son was the young master of the Qi family. He didn't have to worry about the money. Only then did he call Jiang Hai's mother-in-law, causing her illness. And yesterday, Qi Zhengtao came over and directly paid off the 10 million yuan. This was the money that Qi Yuanlong had gathered for him. His family's fortune was almost gone. After paying off the 10 million yuan, Zhao Chen's attitude was much better. Moreover, he believed that Qi Zhengtao was the young master of the Qi family. Then he told Zhao Chen that 10 million yuan was nothing to the Qi family, which had a market value of tens of billions. However, he had been a little annoyed recently, so he always came here to gamble. He said that Jiang Hai was Qi Li's little husband. He didn't have any ability. For the sake of his wife, he came to their family all day long to cause trouble. He wanted to teach Jiang Hai a lesson, so he told Zhao Chen that he wanted to capture Jiang Hai or give Jiang Hai a good beating. At the very least, he wanted him to stop criticizing him. If the matter was successful, he could let Zhao Chen invest. With money, everyone could make money together. After Zhao Chen finished investigating the situation of the Qi family, he was quite tempted. No matter how successful he was now, he was only a hooligan. He couldn't be seen in public. Even the director of a police station could get him in. However, if he became a shareholder of the Qi family, it would be different. However, he was careful by nature, so he still checked Jiang Hai's situation. However, how could he find out about the situation of Jiang Hai's higher-ups and the situation abroad? At most, he could only send some underlings to look for people Jiang Hai knew. He couldn't look for those good friends. He could only look for those classmates who were far away, former colleagues, neighbors in the community, and so on. They knew nothing. His classmates only knew that Zhang Hai had bought a manor to raise cattle in the United States. The internet said every day that one could buy a farm in the United States with a few 100,000 yuan. They estimated that Zhang Hai was at the same level. At this age, which young man would be convinced by a guy who didn't rely on his father? Even if Zhang Hai told them that he made tens of billions of dollars a year, they wouldn't believe it. Moreover, Zhang Hai wouldn't tell them. As for his neighbors and colleagues, they didn't even know. It was precisely because he understood this situation that Zhao Chen dared to make a move on Zhang Hai. Who knew that it was over? He had kicked an iron plate. What he said to Chief Lu just now was just to calm him down. In reality, he was already at his wits' end. After calming down, he hurriedly stood up, then quickly went to his safe and took out all the cash and jewelry. Then, he went directly to the garage downstairs from the room's back door. He drove a very inconspicuous Chevrolet and was about to leave. However, just as his car turned out and drove less than 2 blocks, on a narrow road, 2 cars, one in front and one behind, directly stopped him. Then, 2 foreign girls came out of the car with a trace of disdain on their faces. Chapter 1044. Boss, I've brought him. Carrying a man with a weak body and a black cloth bag over his head, Azalina walked into a dilapidated factory building that was leaking air everywhere. At this time, a person was sitting in the factory. To be exact, it was a man. This man was none other than Zhang Hai. Looking at the person who was brought over in front of him, Zhang Hai chuckled. Hello. Walking in front of him, Zhang Hai took the bag off his head. When he saw that it was Zhang Hai, the man couldn't help but regret it. He didn't expect Zhang Hai to be so fast. Big brother, I have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. If I have offended you, please show me the way. Lowering his head, Zhao Chen was not an ordinary person. In such a situation, he did not panic too much and was still negotiating with Zhang Hai. You should be glad that this is Huaxia. This is Ice City, and there is no sea here. If you were in the United States, you would have already been fed to the sharks. But to be honest, even in Huaxia, it is not difficult for me to kill you. You are in existence in the underground world. Even if you die, no one will seek justice for you, don't you think so? Looking at Zhao Chen in front of him, Zhang Hai bent down with a smile and looked at the guy with a bruised nose and swollen face. It seemed that when he came over, he had been beaten up badly by Azalina and Wallace Shelley. Indeed, since he dared to attack Zhang Hai, it would be strange if they did not explode. Big brother, I think you also know that I was used as a tool by others in this matter. I don't know how capable you are. If you have any orders, just tell me directly. If I can do it, I will definitely do it. Do you want money, my family property, or anything else? Just say the word. Looking at Zhang Hai, Zhao Chen forced himself to raise his head and said while panting heavily. But don't worry, I don't want your money, and I don't want your land. The money is mine. That money is something you can't even dream of. Come on. Let me ask you a question first. Who is the person behind this? Looking at Zhao Chen since he was so tactful, it saved Zhang Hai a lot of trouble. The person behind me is Chief Lu of the Municipal Public Security Bureau. The person who attacked you is a guy called Qi Zhengtao. He said that he is the young master of the Qi family. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Zhao Chen immediately told him about the person behind him and the person who ordered him to attack Zhang Hai. Tiske. I knew it was this guy. But you're really stupid. Do you really believe everything he says? Don't you know how to investigate it yourself? The person in charge of the Qi family is Qi Zhengtao? Hearing him say it so straightforwardly, Zhang Hai couldn't help but touch his chin. This time, the target was confirmed. It seemed that the person who was causing trouble behind the scenes was Qi Yuanlong's family. He. Hearing what Zhang Hai said, Zhao Chen smiled awkwardly. If it weren't for the investigation, he wouldn't have dared to make a move. It was precisely because of the investigation that Zhang Hai wasn't a strong person that he dared to make a move. In the end, who knew that he would kick an iron plate this time, and it was quite solid. Now, his little life was in the hands of the other party. I'm a narrow-minded person who will seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Logically speaking, since you sent more than 40 people to trouble me, you're dead meat. Whether or not your family will be implicated is also up to me. However, seeing that you're so smart now, I really can't beat you to death with a stick. Tell me, what reason do you have for me to let you go? Don't talk about money, don't talk about things. I don't lack money, so I don't lack anything that can be bought with money, including your life. Hearing Zhao Chen's words, Zhang Hai squatted down and looked at him as he spoke slowly. In fact, according to his character, it was impossible to cut the grass without removing the roots, but he couldn't do it easily. This was Huaxia, not the United States. If someone really wanted to touch Zhang Hai in Huaxia, they only lacked a reason. Zhang Hai did not believe that there were no big shots in Huaxia who were interested in Zhang Hai's beef, Zhang Hai's fish, and Zhang Hai's forage formula. Why didn't they dare to touch Zhang Hai? Or send a staff member or something to come and tell Zhang Hai that he had to offer the formula in his hands for the rise of China. In the future, he would be a hero of Huaxia or something like that. Why didn't they do that? This was because Zhang Hai's main business was abroad. However, if he had any trouble in the country, these people wouldn't let him go. Although Zhang Hai helped the country to connect with Dubai, they still wouldn't let him go. In the face of benefits, it didn't matter whether you had made contributions in the past or not. This was because contributions did not offset mistakes, or contributions offset mistakes. It was just a sentence from the higher-ups. People were unequal from the moment they were born. There was no need to be unconvinced. This was the truth. I'll turn myself in. I have a video of me talking to that person. I'll turn myself in. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Zhao Chen was on his way. Compared to dying, it might be much better to turn himself in. He had money, so as long as he was not sentenced to death immediately, he had a way to survive. As long as he took on this matter, regardless of whether he was in prison for 10 or 15 years, he would be a good man again when he came out. As for Qi Zhengtao, he naturally would not let him have an easy time. Okay, I'll wait for the news of you turning yourself in. You have 4 hours. After 4 hours, if I don't hear this news, you can say goodbye to this world forever. Looking at the time, it was only 6 o'clock in the morning. Zhang Hai pointed to the time above and said to Zhao Chen. Then, he gave Azalina a look. Azalina was not polite. Azalina directly pulled this guy to put on the hood again and brought him back to her car. After throwing him to the place where he was caught, Azalina also drove away. When Zhao Chen pulled off the cloth on his head, he looked at the familiar car in front of him. He couldn't help but laugh at himself. He thought about running away, but judging from the situation just now, if he drove out of the city now, he would probably be seen again in Songjiang if others saw him again. He was very sure that Zhang Hai was not joking because the murderous intent in Zhang Hai's eyes just now was quite condensed. This proved that this person had at least a few or even dozens of lives on his hands. He naturally would not care about one more life. Although he did not know why he wanted to use the weapon of law to deal with him and Qi Zhengtao, he did not dare to resist. After getting back into the car and starting the engine, Zhao Chen returned to his clubhouse. After going upstairs, he pondered for half an hour and then started to make calls. He wanted to call the people who were related to him. Then he started to use it. Then, he took the video of his conversation with Qi Zhengtao and went to the municipal bureau to turn himself in. Originally, the people from the municipal bureau and the provincial bureau were still there interrogating. They had just found out that the person behind it was Zhao Chen and were about to deploy. When they were about to arrest him, Zhao Chen turned himself in and told everyone that the person behind it was Qi Zhengtao. After learning about this matter, the people from the municipal bureau also acted very quickly. After all, there were people from above keeping an eye on it. They immediately drove to Qi Yuanlong's house. At this time, Qi Yuanlong's family still did not know what had happened. Qi Yuanlong had just sold everything he had yesterday to help his son pay off the 10 million gambling debt. The whole family was waiting for the news there. In the end, they had just woken up this morning. Before the news came, the police came and directly arrested Qi Zhengtao. The charge was suspected of kidnapping and murdering Zhang Hai. When he heard the news, Qi Yuanlong was stunned. Zhang Yu was already prepared to run away. She knew that Zhang Hai's revenge was coming. Now it was Qi Zhengtao. Later it might be her. If she did not run now, she would be dead. Thinking of this, Zhang Yu became even more flustered. After Qi Zhangtao was taken away by the police, Qi Yuanlong immediately went to the hospital. He wanted to beg Zhang Hai for help. He did not think about what would happen if his son really succeeded. He only knew that his son could not go to jail. Nothing could happen to him. Unfortunately, Zhang Hai did not think so. Unfortunately, when he arrived at the hospital, he did not see Zhang Hai or even Qi Li's mother. This was because Zhang Hai had already taken them to his villa. Even if Qi Yuanlong went to the Qi family's mansion to look for them, he would not be able to find them. Just as he was looking all over the world for Zhang Hai, Zhang Yu took the rest of the family's money and ran away. Unfortunately, did you really think that she could run away? On the way to the airport, Zhang Yu's car brakes failed and she hit the roadside fence. It was similar to the reason why the An family died. However, the result was different. Because there were no cliffs or anything like that in Bingqing City, the fence pierced through the car window, got into the car, and directly penetrated her. No one knew how long she had lived, but the way she died was quite tragic. When Qi Yuanlong, who was looking for Zhang Hai's family, heard the news, he was in a bad mood. He sat on the road dispiritedly and began to cry. This was how people were. When they were looking for death, they did not think that they were looking for death. They thought that they were creating history. Only when they really looked for death did they realize that they were really looking for death, and there was nothing they could do about it. If Qi Yuanlong had not been so ambitious, if he had educated Qi Zhangtao well, if he had not had any improper thoughts after his brother's death, perhaps he would still have a position on the board of directors. The most important thing for a person was not talent, but mentality. You had to know when and where to stand. Huaxia people always talked about the golden mean. In fact, the golden mean was also the essence of human life. However, in this slightly exaggerated world, everyone fought for the first place in everything. People only saw the first place drinking and eating meat, but did not see the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. 100 people died. Was it really so easy to achieve a success rate of 1 in 10,000, or even 1 in a million? Chapter 1045. Hugh. Lying on Zhang Hai's chest, Qi Li was constantly gasping for breath. At the same time, she slowly moved her legs. The battle just now made her legs tired. Zhang Hai moved the hair on her face because of sweat to the side. Looking at her beautiful face, Zhang Hai gently kissed her forehead, and Qi Li also smiled sweetly. Hugh, you didn't do that just now? Looking up at Zhang Hai, Qi Li asked in a low voice. Oh, I already did that. This is the second time. Although Qi Li's words were not very clear, Zhang Hai understood what she was talking about. He chuckled and said to her. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qi Li also nodded. That's good. Mom has been urging us to have a child. You have to plant your seed in the right place. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qi Li said with a smile. At the same time, she gently moved and felt something still in her body. She couldn't help but pinch Zhang Hai's waist and then glanced at him. Go find those little girls. Remember to come back in the morning. Also, don't be found by Mom and Xueqi. Looking at Zhang Hai, Qi Li whispered in Zhang Hai's ear. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai was stunned for a moment, then he shook his head. I still have a lot of opportunities with them, but I don't have much time with you. Let's sleep like this. Hugging Qi Li, Zhang Hai said slowly. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qi Li was touched. After lightly hitting Zhang Hai, she didn't say anything. She just lay there and her breathing gradually stabilized. What do you think will happen to third uncle's family in the future? Hearing Zhang Hai's powerful heartbeat, Qi Li suddenly asked him. What else can we do? Hearing her words, Zhang Hai knew that she was being sentimental again. He couldn't help but pat her to stop her from thinking about this matter. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, she also smiled and closed her mouth. Since the incident that day, Qi Yuanlong's family was completely finished. Zhang Yu was dead, and Qi Zhangtao was arrested and sent to prison. According to Zhang Hai's request, he was tortured to death. This time, Qi Zhangtao would probably not be able to get out of prison for 8 to 10 years. Moreover, even if he stayed there for 10 or 8 years, he might not be able to come out. Don't forget that Zhao Chen had also gone in. Would he let Qi Zhangtao, this fellow who had harmed him, off so easily? You don't have to think with your toes to know that it's impossible. After knowing this, Xueqi still felt a little emotional. After all, they were real relatives. That was her father's younger brother. Although he did it himself, she still couldn't bear to see him in such a miserable state. Okay. After a while, you can take 3/1000 of the shares and give them to your third uncle. You can give him dividends for his retirement, but you have no right to control them. Looking at Xueqi's appearance, Zhang Hai sighed. Women really can't harden their hearts. Really? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Xueqi's eyes widened and she said with a smile. Well, okay, don't think about it now. Tomorrow, Fu Yuan said that he would have a barbecue at his house. Have you thought about what to bring? Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also changed the topic. Now is not the time to think about those things. Beef. I marinated it with little ya in the afternoon. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Xueqi also said with a smile. Only beef? Isn't it a little too little? Looking at Xueqi, Zhang Hai asked with some concern. What else do you want to bring? You have to sell those things for money. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Xueqi couldn't help but pout. Okay, you have the final say. Shrugging, Xueqi is here, so let her have the final say. Women are really stingy. Early the next morning, Zhang Hai and Xueqi drove away under the envious eyes of Qi Jie and Qi Ya. This was the 6th day since Zhang Hai returned to Bing City. The first 3 days were used to deal with things, and the second 3 days were used to take care of his mother-in-law. Originally, Zhang Hai thought that his mother-in-law would have to have an operation this time, but unexpectedly, it was useless. Perhaps it was because she still had the foundation of eating beef and seafood in the past. After taking out some of the frozen beef and seafood that Zhang Xueqi had not thrown away in time to cook, the old lady's heart gradually returned to the right track. As long as it can be temporarily pulled back, Zhang Hai's aura will be able to cure the old lady's illness. The old lady's illness gradually improved, and Zhang Hai breathed a sigh of relief. Qi had been teaching Zhang Xueqi how to cook these days and how to take care of the old lady. Qi Jie was a doctor, so naturally, she had to stay at home. Azalina, Wallace Shelley, and Du Ning had nothing to do, so they all lived in Zhang Hai's villa. Zhang Hai and Xueqi were relatively free. According to the old lady's original plan, Zhang Hai and Xueqi should go back. However, Zhang Hai didn't dare to wait for Qi Jie and the others, so he could only wait here. As for Xueqi, since Zhang Hai was in China, she was not in a hurry to go back. At present, the Qi group was slowly on the right track. She controlled the Qi group from afar, so there would be no problems. Recently, she had been training people to take over the Qi group. It might not be very convincing if she said it out loud. The person she was most optimistic about was LVC. However, after this incident, it was estimated that even if LVC didn't hold a grudge against her, Xueqi would no longer believe her. Therefore, they had to look for new talents and nurture them anew. This was not an easy task. If she wanted to train people, she was destined to be separated from Zhang Hai for a short time. In this case, how could she not seize the opportunity to stay by Zhang Hai's side, even if it was only for a minute? Therefore, she was very close to Zhang Hai these days. Except for the time when Zhang Hai went to the bathroom, she even followed him to take a bath. She was not shy. It was precisely because he knew her inner thoughts that Zhang Hai didn't leave last night. Today's party was booked when Zhang Hai and Fu Yuan went to take a bath that day. Zhang Hai's friends must have a gathering when he came back. Fu Yuan bought a house 2 years ago. It was a ready-made house, but he didn't live in it. Because the community hadn't been repaired yet, the supporting materials hadn't been completed, and the place was quite remote. Of course, it was only 2 years later. The place was still remote, and the things hadn't been completed yet. However, Fu Yuan wasn't in a hurry. After all, he still didn't have a girlfriend that he was going to get married to. But in the past few years, whether he was pretending or not, the renovation of his house had also been completed. Since Zhang Hai had come back and everyone was present, he decided to go to his house and have a look. It could be considered as a celebration. For a new house like this, people would come over to check it out. The main reason was to add some liveliness to the house and ask the guests who originally lived in the house to leave. Of course, this was also the old man's way of saying. However, there seemed to be some reason behind this statement. Look at those places where people come and go all year round. For example, hospitals. You know that many people have died here, but when you go there during normal times, very few people will feel that the hospital is lifeless. Of course, there is an exception at night. As for schools, when children go to school, no one will feel that it is a little eerie. But when the children were out of school, the whole school was similar to a ghost house. This was also relatively typical. Although Fu Yuan didn't have such an idea, his parents believed in these things. So, he specially invited Zhang Hai and his friends to go over to increase the popularity. Zhang Hai and the others naturally wouldn't not come. They came over to play. Of course they had to come. Driving the BMW, Zhang Hai and Qi Li brought 10 pounds of beef to Fu Yuan's new house. To be honest, the place of his new house was indeed very remote. The community was in the north, south, east, and west. There were only things in the east and south. In the east, there was a community that was being built. There was also a ski resort inside. It was the kind that was indoor and very high-end. The south was the road. His community was at the head of this area. There was also a new community opposite. In the north and west, there was a large wilderness. There weren't even trees. It was all grass that was half a person's height. It wasn't the first time Zhang Hai came. The last time he came, he said that if Fu Yuan and his wife were tired of playing at home in the future, they could go there to play. Along the way, there were a lot of people. Basically, they were all renovated. There were also a lot of cars. Some were private, and some were for transporting goods. But in this neighborhood, the supporting facilities obviously hadn't been built yet. Along the way, there were a lot of cars that sold steel pipes, sanitary ware, and paint. But there were very few restaurants and small supermarkets. There were only a few snack shops and the like. Fortunately, Zhang Hai and the others were already prepared. So after the car arrived and parked, Zhang Hai and Qi Li went directly to Fu Yuan's house. After pressing the doorbell and taking the elevator in, Zhang Hai found that some people had already arrived. Because of the need for popularity, there were really a lot of people who came. In addition to Zhang Hai and Qi Li, there were Su Wei, Xianghua's family of 3, Huang Yunfei and his wife, Wang Yong and his wife, Wu Ming and his wife with their 2 children. There was also a cousin of Fu Yuan. Zhang Hai had seen him before, and a classmate of his. There were 14 people including the children. When they walked in, it was quite lively. Several children, big or small, were running around the room in the nursery. The women all went to the kitchen to help. Wang Yong, Wu Ming, Huang Yunfei, and Su Wei were playing mahjong. Fu Yuan, his cousin, and his classmate were playing Fight the Landlord. It was quite lively. When they saw Zhang Hai and Qi Li coming, everyone looked over. Here is the beef. Cut it and marinate it. We will eat it later. Seeing Fu Yuan coming over, Zhang Hai handed the beef to him first. More than a dozen people naturally couldn't eat enough beef, but today, they were not here to eat beef. Your beef, Tesque. I have to leave some. Recently, I have taken a fancy to a girl. Whether I can get her or not depends on your beef. Taking the beef in Zhang Hai's hand, Fu Yuan smacked his lips. He knew that Zhang Hai's thing was really fun. P.S. I recommend a buddy's new book, My Portable World of Mixed Farmers. It is a very good farming book. Friends who are out of books can go and read it. The author is Dong DePeo, who is known as the Yuewen self-driving cannon. He is a super experienced driver, the racing god of Mount Akina. He can recite all kinds of vegetables, fruit seeds, and army numbers. If you need, you can go and see if he has a book group. Chapter 1046. Tell me if you want to eat. I will definitely support your marriage. Do it today. Drive to my place to pick it up in a few days. I still have some. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Zhang Hai also said to him with a smile. Hearing Zhang Hai say this, Fu Yuan also gave him a thumbs up and then took it to the kitchen with a smile. Naturally, there would be people working there. Although Fu Yuan didn't have a girlfriend yet, there were a lot of women who came today. It was inevitable for them to come and help. The most important thing was that they really didn't need to do anything. Fu Yuan was a bachelor, so he naturally did the simplest things. Today, Zhang Hai and the others ate barbecue at noon. The best thing about Fu Yuan's house was that it was an H-shaped house. Fu Yuan's living room was facing the top floor of the lower floor, which could be used for barbecue. Of course, it was not to directly light a fire there, but to use a rack. He considered that there would be a lot of people coming, so he specially prepared 2 racks, both of which were for burning charcoal. One was very wide and needed to be covered with some barbed wire to barbecue meat, roast scallops, fish, and so on. The other was narrower for barbecue and barbecue skewers. Today, Jiang Hai was not the only one who brought things here. Xueqi bought all the vegetables, lettuce, chives, enoki mushrooms, oyster mushrooms, onions, garlic, chili, and so on. Xianghua bought chicken wings, chicken breast meat, and a bottle of white wine. Huang Yunfei carried 2 bottles of red wine and a bucket of oysters. Of course, this game should not be comparable to the one Jiang Hai ate at Old Clive's place during the Poseidon ritual. This was just the most common kind of oyster. Because it was not the time for oysters to be produced, the price was slightly more expensive, 5 yuan per tael. Well, this game should not be expensive. Wang Yong bought skewers of mutton and beef. He didn't know if they were real, but he bought a lot of them. There were also some ham sausages and so on. Wu Ming prepared beer. 3 boxes of beer, 1 box of 12 bottles. These men had enough to drink today. In addition to the 10 pounds of beef brought by Jiang Hai, they could eat what they couldn't eat. Naturally, the host, Fu Yuan, had prepared a lot of things, including frozen fish and prawns. After Jiang Hai and Qili came in, Qili was very sensible. She took off her coat and went into the kitchen to see if there was anything she could help with. But to be honest, although Jiang Hai and the others were buddies, when women were together, the most important thing was to fight. However, they could not get into a fight with Qili. How could they? She was the leader of a billion-dollar company, and her husband was worth tens of billions of dollars. He was good-looking, rich, and educated, so there was nothing to argue about. What was there to be cocky about? You see, my husband bought me a diamond ring, and my husband bought me a coat, right? She said. Qili's jewelry might not be comparable to all their jewelry added together. There was no comparison. Therefore, after Qili went to the kitchen, she was assigned the easiest task, which was to tear the enoki mushroom. It didn't need to be too big, just 1 piece at a time. Then they talked to each other. The topic also changed from what our family bought, what my husband bought for me, to what are the trends of this year, what are the fun things on the internet recently, and the various bad habits of my husband. Well, women's topics were always very sharp. Jiang Hai could only laugh at this. Jiang Hai sat next to Fu Yuan and watched him play the game. Fu Yuan, his classmate, and his cousin's skills were good because they always played, but they didn't play much. At least in Jiang Hai's opinion, he shouldn't be able to beat them. After playing for a while, Xianghua also coaxed the child to sleep and joined in. Because there were more people, everyone played Texas together. Of course, they also played some money, but it wasn't much. The minimum was 1 yuan, and the highest was 5 yuan. Winning or losing was only a few hundred yuan. Now, Jiang Hai and the others didn't care about the few hundred yuan. Because it was 10 o'clock when Jiang Hai and the others went out, it was 10 o'clock. When they arrived, it was 10 o'clock. After playing for less than an hour, it was almost time to eat. After they finished, everyone went outside to the platform. The dishes were served one by one. Today's chief chefs were Xueqi and Wang Yong. The two liked to study how to make food by themselves. Each of them was guarding a stove, and the charcoal had already been raised. Now they could directly roast it. But when they were waiting for the first pot, Fu Yuan also took out some dried fruits from the house for everyone to eat. After Jiang Hai helped to move the wine, tables, and other things, he had nothing to do. He just happened to see Qili sitting there eating pine nuts. He walked over and grabbed a handful of pine nuts to eat. After eating 2, Jiang Hai couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. The taste of pine nuts was not bad. The Northeast was rich in pine nuts. Many pine nuts from all over the country were shipped from the Northeast. Every new year, in fact, even the people in the Northeast would buy some pine nuts. Outsiders knew that the Northeast had 3 treasures: ginseng, mink, and deer antler. But in fact, in the Northeast, ginseng was a toy. To be honest, 99% of the ginseng was farmed. Its medicinal effect was not much different from radishes. Mink fur was also very expensive in the Northeast. A mink fur was easily sold for 20 to 30,000 yuan. Deer antler was sold in a lot, but Zhang Hai had never eaten it. Instead, he ate it for the first time after going to the United States. Compared to the things above, the Northeast people were more used to the Northeast specialties: pine nuts, hazelnuts, wood ears, mushrooms, and so on. Especially wood ears. To be honest, if one was used to eating wood ears in the Northeast, they might not be used to eating them outside. The same was true for pine nuts. Basically, there were only 3 kinds of pine nuts in the country: Brazilian pine nuts, Northeast pine nuts, and wet pine nuts, also known as sea pine nuts. Brazilian pine nuts were also known as American pine nuts. But Zhang Hai knew that there were no pine nuts in the United States. There were only 2 kinds of pine trees in the United States. One was American pine, and the other was American Douglas fir. The former was like the pine trees in the green belt in China. But pine nuts, were not eaten. Americans mainly ate Brazilian pine nuts. They were slender and very big, but to be honest, the taste was not as good as the ones in China. Moreover, the price in China was quite expensive. The pine nuts in the Northeast were mainly red pine. This thing was not available in the United States. Other than Huaxia, only Soviet Russia and some European countries had it. Wet pine nuts mainly came from Jiangsu Province and Nanyun Province. Of course, there were many pine trees that produced pine nuts, but only these 3 kinds were edible and delicious. Hey, where did you get these pine nuts? Looking at Fu Yuan, Zhang Hai couldn't help but pat him and asked with some doubts. These pine nuts were indeed delicious. They were not too oily or greasy, but the taste of pine nuts was very fragrant, making people want to eat more after eating them. Delicious, right? My classmates in my hometown brought it to me. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Fu Yuan said with a smile. Where? Hearing him say hometown, Zhang Hai knew Fu Yuan's hometown, Xueqi City, but it produced fish. Hailin's hometown. Hazelnuts are also delicious. The wood ears there are also very good. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Fu Yuan also said with a smile. Hearing him say this, Zhang Hai couldn't help but smack his lips. He was quite concerned about food. When you have time, take me to have a look. After thinking about it, Zhang Hai was going to take a look. If there was a place with delicious food, he always had to bring some back to his manor. Otherwise, his heart would be uncomfortable. Okay, no problem. Let's see, the day after tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Fu Yuan also said with a smile. He also made an appointment with Zhang Hai. It was just the beginning of spring, and he was not busy yet. He just had time to go back. After making an appointment, Zhang Hai and the others also began to eat. After eating dried fruits for a while, the first pot of barbecue and skewers were ready. Everyone ate first. When they were waiting for the second pot, the beer and other things were opened. There was nothing to say. Let's drink. Today, these people drove a total of 4 cars. Not counting Fu Yuan's home here, there were Zhang Hai's car, Su Wei's car, Huang Yunfei's car, and Wang Yong's car. Wang Yong came with Wu Ming, and Xiang Hua came with Su Wei's car. In addition to Su Wei, Huang Yunfei, Wang Yong, and Zhang Hai's wives could all drive. Naturally, there was no problem of not being able to drink. For a while, they ate big pieces of meat and drank big mouthfuls of wine. It was difficult to feel the forthright feeling of the people in the Northeast without going there. As Zhang Hai and the others began to eat meat, drink, and brag, the atmosphere also rose steadily. Beer, white wine, and red wine mixed together, and the consciousness in the head gradually disappeared. But fortunately, the women were controlling the rhythm. It was okay to drink, but not to drink too much, and not to drink too much to get hurt. This was the most important thing. This meal lasted from noon to evening. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the children began to make noise. Some wanted to sleep, some felt tired, some felt bored, and some wanted to go home. Only then did they disperse. Zhang Hai also drank a lot today, but with his physical fitness, the alcohol was not a problem. But he was also a little dizzy, but he still let Qili drive. He leaned on the passenger seat and closed his eyes, looking at Zhang Hai sitting there. Thinking about what happened today, Qili couldn't help but chuckle. This kind of life was actually quite good. There was no intrigue in the business world, and there was no deception in the family. She liked this kind of life. While driving, looking at the early evening lights outside, Qili also said softly, "If you let go of the Qi family, you can live like this every day. I heard little Jia and little Ya say that they just go to the vegetable field every day and simply eat, drink, and play. This is simply the life of a god. If I met you earlier, it would be great." Chapter 1047. Click, click. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, Zhang Hai and Qi Li returned to Zhang Hai's home. As soon as they came in, they saw Qi Jie sitting on the sofa watching TV, swinging her long white legs. In addition to her, only Azalina and the other two were sitting in the distance, playing Fight the Landlord. They had nothing to do. Qi Ya should be in the kitchen, because there were some sounds in the kitchen. As for Qi Li's mother, she was still sick, so she went to bed early. Although Zhang Xueqi also came, she still blamed herself. Usually, she would get up when Qi Li's mother woke up, and when Qi Li's mother slept, she would sleep. She rarely showed up alone. Seeing Zhang Hai and Qi Li come back, Qi Jie couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and say with a smile, "Hey, you're back. What are you talking about? Call me sister and brother-in-law." Hearing Qi Jie's words, Qi Li couldn't help but glare at her. Speaking of which, Qi Li was still angry in her heart. What was this called? 3 sisters having sex with the same person. This was really ridiculous. However, things just happened, and she had no choice but to accept it. Therefore, every time she saw Qi Jie and Qi Ya, she would definitely feel a little angry. After all, even though she accepted it, she still felt a little unhappy in her heart. TSK. Hearing Qi Li's words, Qi Jie couldn't help but curl her lips, and then sat back on the sofa. "I'm going to take a shower first." Looking at this awkward atmosphere, Zhang Hai wanted to run away. After saying to Qi Li, he rushed upstairs. Qi Li looked at Zhang Hai's back and slowly walked upstairs. But halfway up, she suddenly stopped and looked at Du Ning in the distance. "Du Ning, you too." Qi Li waved her hand to Du Ning and went upstairs first. Hearing Qi Li's words, everyone looked at Du Ning with a smile. Du Ning also blushed, but she didn't refuse. She threw away the cards in her hand. Even if she still had 2 kings in her hand, she didn't play this round and quickly went upstairs with Qi Li. Qi Li had her reasons for thinking this way. She couldn't leave the capital for the time being. Du Ning was responsible for protecting her, so naturally, he couldn't leave easily. If she were to occupy Zhang Hai for the next few days, wouldn't Du Ning be a little pitiful? Therefore, Qi Li, who had never accepted staying with Zhang Hai in the past, made an exception today. However, when she left, she also told Du Ning to go back to her room quietly after finishing the business. She couldn't let her mother see her. Otherwise, the old lady would be very sad. She didn't know how sad she would be. After arriving at Zhang Hai's master bedroom, Zhang Hai had already started to take a bath in the bathroom. After Qi Li and Du Ning glanced at each other, the two took off their clothes and walked into the bathroom. When Zhang Hai saw them, he couldn't help but smile. He took the initiative to walk over and took the two under the shower. Glancing at Zhang Hai, Qi Xian hugged Zhang Hai's neck and kissed him while being drenched. As for Du Ning, after kissing him, she took the initiative to squat down. There was no need to describe in detail what they were doing. The night was still long. It was a silent night. Indeed, there were no words, only some exclamations. The next morning, when Zhang Hai and Qi Li woke up, there were only the 2 of them. After washing up, Zhang Hai and the others didn't go anywhere today. They just stayed at home indifferently for the whole day. At the same time, Fu Yuan also came over to give Zhang Hai a call, telling him that they would leave tomorrow morning. Today he couldn't move. These people didn't have Zhang Hai's physical fitness. Today, these people's bodies were weak and sore. However, some people still had to go to work. They still had to do what they needed to do. Whether or not it would affect them, he didn't know. On the contrary, Zhang Hai was still lively. After staying at home for a day, Zhang Hai and Qi Li drove the BMW to Fu Yuan's house early the next morning. "Hey, you are here. You drank so much the day before yesterday. Did you feel uncomfortable?" After a long phone call, Fu Yuan walked out of the house. When he saw Zhang Hai, he specially greeted him. "It's okay. I often drink in the United States, so it's okay. Hearing Fu Yuan's words, Zhang Hai also found an excuse for himself and said with a smile. Fu Yuan had also been to Zhang Hai's house, so naturally, he knew that there were many drunkards in Zhang Hai's manor. Beer, vodka, brandy, tequila, and so on were all mixed together. Perhaps Zhang Hai's resistance to alcohol was stronger. With a sigh, he also got into his car, stepped on the accelerator, and took Zhang Hai to the direction of Hailin City. Fu Yuan's hometown was also in Heilong Province, Peony River City. Hailin City was a county-level city under Peony River City. You could say that it was a district or a city. It was like there was a city in Bing City. Administratively it was a district, but in fact it was a city. There were many cities like this in Huaxia. It was less than 300 kilometers away from Bing City, so it was not very troublesome to drive there. Other than the time needed to exit the city and enter the highway, if the highway was not congested, it would take about 3 hours to get there. They set off at 8 o'clock. At 11 o'clock, it was time to have dinner. The whole 3 provinces in the northeast were mostly plains. Songnan Plains. There were no mountains in the northeast. The biggest mountain was the Changbai Mountains, but that was only in Jimyumu Province and Liaoning Province. There were no mountains in Heilong Province. The hills around Bing City were a few hundred meters high. It was considered a good mountain, but it could not be compared to those famous mountains in the south. The only good thing about Bing City was that there were highways and bullet trains. Because the roads were very straight, it could run very fast. Although there were no mountains in Heilong Province, there were 2 ridges, De Anling and Xiao Anling. De Anling was too big, and to be honest, it was really deserted. Xiao Anling was better, but this had nothing to do with the place Zhang Hai was going to today. Hailin had many names, but the most famous one should be Hailin Snowfield. That's right. That's right. The sitting mountain eagle happened here. Of course, no one knew if it really happened or not. But to be honest, there were a lot of low mountains here. The land here was 9 mountains, half water and half land. It was indeed in the 3 provinces in the northeast. It was not a good place for farming. But because there were a lot of mountains, there were a lot of things produced here. There were all kinds of mountain products, paddles, dried fruits, and medicinal herbs. These were all specialties of this city. When they got off the highway, Zhang Hai saw a lot of people on both sides of the road into the city. They were selling paddles. Among these paddles, most of them were kusanagi. Zhang Hai also liked to eat kusanagi. But to be honest, the kusanagi in Bing City, there were 2 types of kusanagi in Heilong Province. One was kusanagi in a greenhouse. It looked good, but it tasted bad. The second type was kusanagi, which was wild kusanagi. The taste was not bad. It was sour and sweet, but it was not sold well. If one did not order one, the kusanagi in Bing City would be much better than the kusanagi in other places. The kusanagi in the 3 northeast provinces was the best in Dandong City, followed by Lu Province, Sichuan Province, etc. The kusanagi in these places were also very delicious. But the kusanagi in these places was not included in the Heilong Province. Although the kusanagi in Heilong Province was not good, another type of kusanagi, blue kusanagi, was the best in Heilong Province. Even if other cities also planted blue kusanagi, the taste was not as good. But speaking of Hailin, there were 2 most famous specialties in Hailin. One was pine seeds, and the other was ginseng. Hailin was one of the most important pine seed producing areas in Heilong Province. It was also one of the first cities in China to transplant ginseng. Although this city was not big, it had a lot of resources. Every day, people from all over the country would come here to buy pine seeds and ginseng. It was very lively. Fu Yuan's classmate lived in the mountains near this city. This wasn't the first time Fu Yuan had come here. Naturally, he wasn't polite and went directly to his classmate's house. When Zhang Hai arrived, his classmate and his classmate's wife had already prepared a very special local dish for them to eat. After introducing each other and getting to know each other, they did not stand on ceremony and started to eat directly. Although Zhang Hai drove a BMW, Zhang Hai's own casual temperament made it easy for him to make friends. After a while, they were very familiar with each other. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, the group went to the back of the mountain. Zhang Hai came this time to buy some pine seeds to eat, and also to see if he could get some red pine seeds to plant. But after inquiring about it, he learned that this was not an easy thing to do. Nowadays, pine trees are sold as saplings. Currently, the red pine seeds are used for eating. They are big and have a high oil content, but there is no way to plant them. Unlike willow trees, pine trees have a poor regenerative ability. There was an old saying that went, "When there is wind, you will huff. When there is no wind, you will huff. When there is no wind, you will huff." It referred to the pine tree. As long as it was cut, no matter if it was a branch or something else, it would be useless. It would not survive. Therefore, transplanting pine trees was a very troublesome thing. However, Zhang Hai still wanted to give it a try. He made some raw pine cones. These were just picked from the tree. The scales have not yet opened. Only this kind of cones can be planted. After Zhang Hai brings them back to the United States, he can dry them in the sun. After those plump seeds are exposed to the sun, he can plant them. After looking at the pine seeds, Zhang Hai went down to look at the ginseng, which was the so-called ginseng in the forest. He was also interested in this. Chapter 1048. Ginseng was a perennial herb. There was no need to introduce it further. It could be found in any encyclopedia. Basically, there were two kinds of ginseng. One was the familiar ginseng, and the other was the American ginseng. One lived in the northeast Korea and the far east of Soviet Russia, while the other lived in the United States and Canada. In terms of efficacy, the ginseng in Asia was naturally better, but the price in the United States was cheaper. Most importantly, the ginseng in the United States was basically wild. No one would plant it there. Ginseng was a medicinal material in Chinese medicine, but in Western medicine, it was a tree root. The people in the United States did not believe in it. Therefore, there were basically three kinds of ginseng in the market. The ginseng in the East was mainly the Chongbai Mountain ginseng, the Korean ginseng, and the American ginseng. It was also called the American ginseng. It was mainly because during the last years of the Qing dynasty and the previous dynasty, the people distinguished the foreigners according to the appearance of the national flag. The American flag was gaudy. Together with the Citibank, it was called the American ginseng. Although the Heilong province was not close to the Chongbai Mountain, there were many ginseng in the Danling and Xianling areas. Its efficacy was naturally good. In recent years, there were naturally no more wild ginseng, but there were more and more farmed ginseng. There were many kinds of farmed ginseng. The one with the worst efficacy was the garden ginseng. It was white and fat. It was raised according to the method of growing radishes. Its nutrition was not much different from radishes. It was 2 to 3 yuan per gram. It was thicker than the other. It was also the most common type of ginseng in the market. The ginseng in the gift boxes was this kind of ginseng. This kind of ginseng needed to be grown for 3 to 6 years. The better one was called the striped ginseng. It needed to be transplanted twice. It was first raised in the garden until it was almost able to survive in the wild. Then it was moved to the fields in the mountains. Its advantage was that its nutrition was better than radishes. Its disadvantage was that it was a little wild. Generally speaking, this kind of ginseng needed to be raised for more than 6 to 8 years. The price in the market was about 100 yuan per plant. The specific price was not available. It depended on the integrity of the merchants. The last type of ginseng was also the best cultivated one. It was the stone pillar ginseng, also known as the forest ginseng. This type of ginseng was directly selected from the wild ginseng. Then, it was planted under a big tree on the mountain to simulate the situation in the wild. At most, they would only remove the weeds. They would definitely not use fertilizers or medicines. They had very strict control over the soil and climate. This thing grew very slowly because there were many things in the natural world that were competing with it for nutrients. Basically, it would take at least 15 years for it to mature. Those that could be sold on the market would take 15 to 20 years. With such a long time, the price would naturally be extremely expensive. This kind of ginseng, after being cultivated, would at most be 30 grams, while the garden ginseng could grow to 300 grams. This was the difference. However, the price wasn't just 10 times that of the garden ginseng. It could be 20 or 30 times that of the garden ginseng. It mainly depended on the efficacy. Zhang Hai was interested in the forest ginseng. He was only interested in the best, but unfortunately, It was the same as the red pine tree. The seedlings of the forest ginseng were basically cultivated. There were seeds, but after buying them, it was unknown whether they could survive. Therefore, most people bought the seedlings of ginseng. However, it was not reliable for others to buy the seeds, but Zhang Hai didn't care. Therefore, after walking around, he bought a lot of ginseng seeds, which were the small red fruits of the ginseng. Of course, these seeds weren't really wild ginseng. They were all artificially cultivated. However, even so, the price of this thing wasn't cheap. After walking around here, Zhang Hai bought 100 pounds of pine seeds. Fu Yuan's classmates gave him 50 pine trees. He also bought 300 ginseng seeds. It could be said that he was returning home with a full harvest. In the evening, Fu Yuan's classmates were originally going to treat them to a meal of forest frogs, but Zhang Hai and the others had already left. After all, they had to drive 3 hours back, so they didn't eat. However, Fu Yuan's classmates brought them a lot of forest frogs. Of course, although they were called forest frogs, they weren't wild. These frogs were also called snow toads, but Zhang Hai preferred to call them hammering frogs. These frogs were used as offerings in the Ming and Qing dynasties, so they were technically called northeastern forest frogs. The taste was quite good. When Zhang Hai was young, his father often bought this thing to eat. It wasn't expensive, only a few yuan per gene. After buying it, Zhang Hai could play with it for several days. But these days when he played with it to death, he directly cleaned it up and fried it to eat. This thing was delicious when cooked well. Generally, it was also delicious when fried, just like fried birds. It was estimated that everyone had played with it when they were young. Basically, in their parents' generation, there were very few people who had not played with birds or had not played with birds. After all, in the past, sparrows were not protected animals. They were one of the 4 pests. At that time, the country ordered people to eat sparrows. But in comparison, hammering frogs were more delicious than birds. But later, they became fewer and fewer. There was even a period of time when they were listed as a protected animal. But after a few years, they were lifted because they were too easy to raise. You can raise them in any pond. A pair of frogs can produce hundreds of them at once. They will grow into frogs in 2 months. A few months later, they can be sold on the market. It is really easy to raise them. You can have as many as you want in 2 years. But Zhang Hai hadn't eaten this thing for a while. This time, he brought it back to study. After settling all the matters here, Zhang Hai and his friends drove back to Bing City. That night, Zhang Hai ate fried hammering frogs. It was prepared by Qi. Although Qi was a young girl, she was very professional. No matter what it was, as long as it was an ingredient, she dares to cook it. Other young girls were afraid of snakes, mice, and frogs. But Qi was not afraid of them. When she was still alive, she would use scissors to cut off the heads of the frogs. She would cut open the intestines and remove the internal organs. Occasionally, when there were females, she would leave the oil and seeds behind. This game should be like selling crabs. There would be more males than females. The oil and seeds of the snow clam were much more expensive than the hammering frogs. Chia fried this thing 3 times. It was very crispy. When Zhang Hai ate it at night, he didn't even need to spit out the bones. He just needed to dip it in the spiced salt. It was crispy and delicious. There was no smell of soil. To be honest, frogs were called frogs. But frogs tasted better than chicken. Fu Yuan's classmate had brought him some frogs, and he finished them in a short time. Moreover, this thing might have some supplements. At night, Zhang Hai felt that he was much more vigorous. Just like this, an ordinary day passed. In the following days, Zhang Hai's life in Bing City was almost the same as when he was in the manor. Every morning when he woke up, he didn't want to show off in front of his mother-in-law. So every morning after breakfast, he would go back to his room to rest for a while or go out with his friends. But now was not the time to go to school. Everyone had work and things to do. Their free time was at night. However, Zhang Hai didn't like to go out at night. So, he was very bored during the day. Luckily, he could endure the loneliness and play computer or mobile games in his room. He played happily. Recently, he was addicted to a game called On My OG. It was hard to understand why a Japanese game was made by Hua Xiao's game company. It was not even imported, but it was done well. Zhang Hai was addicted to this game. He spent some money on it, but he didn't get anything good. However, it wasn't a bad thing, because there were Ibaraki, Shutten, Ubuteri, Ichimu, and other spirits. Everyone had other two-faced Buddhas, so they could ignore them. This lineup, coupled with the support of mountain hare, goldfish, and other spirits, was not bad. He wasn't a European, but he wasn't an African either. Thinking about it, there was no problem. His nationality was Xia, and his territory was in the United States. As for the night, it was Qi Li and Du Ning's home ground. Of course, it wasn't that the other girls didn't encounter them at all. Although Zhang Hai said that he wouldn't be affected by Qi Li's suppression, he still had time to find some time. Regarding this, Qi Li just turned a blind eye. Just like that, more than half a month passed unknowingly. Soon, it was the middle of May. Qi Yuanlong's family's matter had basically been resolved. Qi Zhangtao had gone in. Qi Yuanlong had found countless connections to get a reprieve so that he could think of a way. Unfortunately, Zhang Hai and Qi Li wouldn't give him such a chance. Qi Zhangtao was sentenced to 10 years for attempted murder. Of course, there were other crimes, but that had nothing to do with Zhang Hai. Zhao Chen also went in and was directly sentenced to 15 years. After all, this guy had too much dirt on him. However, as Zhang Hai said, he had taken the initiative to go in. Zhang Hai wouldn't kill him. In these 15 years, he would almost come out with Qi Zhangtao. But whether Qi Zhangtao could come out or not, no one knew. After the dust settled here, Qi Li found Qi Yuanlong through LVC. After explaining to him, he also accepted 0.5% of Qi Li's shares. He knew that this was for his retirement, and he didn't have the mood to do anything else. At this point, the Qi family's matter had officially come to an end. When the Qi family's matter was officially resolved, Zhang Hai's mother-in-law's heart problem was basically cured. As long as she ate Zhang Hai's beef and fish, it wouldn't be a big problem. After all the matters in Bing City were resolved, Qi Li had to leave. Chapter 1049. Hoo 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 woo ha ha. After a burst of rapid breathing, Qi Li's body couldn't help but tremble, and then she leaned weakly on Zhang Hai's chest with a calm face. Looking at her appearance, Zhang Hai couldn't help but pat her butt. Okay, go to sleep. Glancing at his watch, it was already more than 3 o'clock in the morning. Zhang Hai couldn't help but say to her. However, Qi Li shook her head and sat up again, moving slowly while looking at Zhang Hai. No, I'm leaving tomorrow. God knows when I'll see you next time. If I don't sleep tonight, you won't sleep either. Looking at Zhang Hai, Qi Li said with a smile. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also shook his head weakly. But your body can't bear it. Hearing Qi Li's words, Zhang Hai said helplessly. You will have a way, won't you? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qi Li said with a smile, and then moved again. As for Du Ning next to her, he had already gone to sleep. Looking at Qi Li's crazy appearance, Zhang Hai couldn't help but smile bitterly. Why is she doing this? It's as if I'm going to the battlefield. If she wants, she can come to me at any time. It's not that he doesn't have a plane now. He can come once a week for the weekend. However, Qi Li shook her head and refused this proposal. Unconsciously, she was further squeezing Zhang Hai, because Qi Li was very afraid. She was afraid that if she could really go once a month or even once a week like Zhang Hai said, she would be reluctant to leave. The Qi family could not do without her yet. She had to be on her last shift. As long as she could find a suitable successor, everything would be done. In the future, she would have her phone to control the Qi family every day to ensure the survival of the Qi family. However, she had to find a trustworthy person who could carry out her orders 120% of the time. So before that, she could only be crazy for a while, and Zhang Hai had no way to resist. He could only surrender. Then let's do it. That night, Zhang Hai and Qi Li didn't sleep. The sound that could make people's blood boil lasted for a whole night. The next morning, Qi Li and Du Ning left. Zhang Hai drove them to the airport. His private plane would take them to the capital and then come back. Tomorrow, Zhang Hai and the others would leave. Today, Zhang Hai would send the old lady back to the ancestral home of the Qi family. As for Qi Jie and Qi Ye, They also found an excuse to go back to the United States, so they would leave with Zhang Hai and the others. Just like that, another ordinary day passed. After Xueqi repeatedly warned Zhang Xueqi not to mess up again, Zhang Hai and the others also got on his plane and went to Boston. However, as soon as the plane took off, everyone unfastened their seat belts. On the other side, Jie and Xueqi pushed Zhang Hai down and pulled him into the back room. What a joke! These days, watching Zhang Hai and Xueqi live together, they had been suffocating. Now that they were in a private space, what else could they say? How could they not take the opportunity to make up for the time? Although Azalina and Wallace Shelley were also suffocating these days, they were fine now. After Zhang Hai sent Xueqi, his mother-in-law, and Zhang Xueqi back to the Qi family's mansion yesterday, he went back to his own villa. That night naturally belonged to Azalina and Wallace Shelley. Although the two did not stay up all night, they did not go to bed until 2 o'clock in the morning, so they did not really want to go to bed now. Therefore they would not disturb Jie and Xueqi now. In this way, Zhang Hai did not have much rest on the plane. For 3 days in a row, Zhang Hai's sleep time was probably only about 5 hours. After landing, he did not sleep much. After returning home, it was even more lively. There were many people who missed Zhang Hai. After all, this time, Zhang Hai had been away for nearly a month. He left at the end of April, and it was already the end of May when he came back. The smell of summer was getting closer and closer in this city. Some fashionable girls had begun to show their winter results. No matter if they were fat or thin, at least they were white enough. The temperature in Winthrop was quite high at this time. At this time in Bing City, people were wearing short-sleeved shirts, skirts and so on. Although Boston was not as hot as Bing City, it was not too cold either. The highest temperature every day was about 22 degrees Celsius. Sometimes, it was 24 degrees Celsius, and sometimes, it was 21 degrees Celsius or 20 degrees Celsius. At night, the temperature difference was not big. It was about 13 degrees Celsius. So now, the standard in Boston was a short-sleeved shirt and a pair of trousers. If one was afraid of the cold, they could add a thin jacket. Although Winthrop was also in Boston, it was close to the sea. When the breeze blew, it was still a little cold, but that was referring to the outside. It was very warm at home. Before Zhang Hai came back, Aphrodite and the others who stayed here were dressed more seriously. But on the second day after Zhang Hai came back, they all changed. Of course, under the command of Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen, they changed into the clothes that Zhang Hai usually wore at home, mainly in winter and summer. A thin, almost translucent camisole, or a shirt of Zhang Hai's size. Although he almost never wore a shirt, he deliberately only buttoned it in the middle so that the top and bottom could be seen clearly. The jerseys that Zhang Hai bought to play basketball were also their favorite. Especially those who were more petite, they especially liked to wear them. The sleeves could directly reveal half of their balls, but they didn't care. It could be said that their goal was to let Zhang Hai see them. This was only talking about the top, the bottom completely disappeared. When they got on the sofa, they must have M-shaped legs so that Zhang Hai could see them clearly. Or when they saw Zhang Hai sitting there watching TV or something, they directly put their legs on Zhang Hai's legs, or let Zhang Hai rest his head on their legs. These girls were very good at these little tricks. The only difference was Delina, Marian, and Tarag. These 3 girls were under Zhang Hai's strict control. Even if it was hot, they had to wear pajamas. Moreover, they had to wear opaque pajamas. It was impossible for their lower body to disappear. The 3 girls were quite speechless. After fooling around at home for a few days, Zhang Hai also couldn't stand it anymore, so he took the initiative to go outside and stay on the lounge chair. These girls were very clear that Zhang Hai was very possessive. They wore nothing at home, and it didn't matter how they acted coquettishly with Zhang Hai. However, in front of outsiders, they had to wrap themselves up tightly. Except for the arms, legs, neck, and face, they couldn't expose other places. Otherwise, Zhang Hai would be jealous. They were only sexy for Zhang Hai. This was also the reason why Zhang Hai didn't stop them, because they knew when to advance and when to retreat, which was a very good point. Of course, after Zhang Hai came back, it was impossible for him to fool around with his girls at home all day long. He still had his own things to do, such as inspecting the pastures, fishing grounds, and checking accounts during the day. It had to be said that Dulles Gerard had also negotiated the contract. Every year, Zhang Hai would provide Balian Madan with 40% of the red wine produced by his manor. They wouldn't enter Europe and the Middle East, and the price would increase by 21%. This had also been discussed with Pro Walton. The price of red wine in the United States was also increasing, but it was not as horrible as 21%. It only increased by 15%. The original price of a bottle was $800, but now it was $920, and it was limited in each supermarket. Pro Walton didn't have any opinions about this, because this red wine didn't sell particularly well in the first place. It didn't matter if it was more expensive or less, but in the future, she would know that this idea would cause her to lose a lot of income. But now it seemed to be harmless. After Zhang Hai came back, the first batch of red wine had been sent to Europe. How Balian Madan operated there had nothing to do with Zhang Hai, but if his selling price was particularly high, then Zhang Hai would also increase the price next year. He was not a fool. Zhang Hai could still inquire about how much he was selling. The only thing that had some problems was the red wine side. The other industries really didn't have any problems. Now the cowboys were just herding cattle. Every week, people from the Walmart Group and the Sea Merchant Supermarket would come over to pick up the grown cattle and transport them to the slaughterhouse. After killing them, they would put them on ice. They were not frozen, and they would be sent directly to the Boston airport. Zheng Jin would send these beef to the major cities in the United States, and some other second-tier cities would be transported by local trucks. At the same time, there were planes that flew to Europe, but they basically only went to the few major cities in Europe, such as London, Paris, Rome, Berlin, and so on. They were basically the capitals of various countries. Even Moscow was not included. Flights to the fish farm were more frequent. Because fish and beef were different, they basically had to fly once a day. Of course, unlike beef, which was a national flight, they had to fly to the southern part of the United States on Monday, the central part of the United States on Tuesday, the northern part of the United States on Wednesday, and Europe and the international part of the United States on Thursday, which was Huaxia in Japan. Then there was a cycle. However, Europe, Huaxia, and Japan only flew once a week. After all, the demand was not particularly high, and of course, the ration was not particularly large. Now that these things were on the right track, it didn't matter whether Zhang Hai was keeping an eye on them or not. As long as he was keeping an eye on the accounts, it was fine. So after pretending to be busy for a few days, Zhang Hai returned to the time when he was resting. But then again, he really liked resting. Chapter 1050. When a person was bored and his life was monotonous, time would pass very quickly. There was a term for this, it was called swaying. When he was in school, he would feel that time was passing so slowly. A class lasted for 40 minutes. It was almost like a year. But when he entered society, he would feel that time was passing so quickly. He hadn't done anything yet, but the day had already passed. Especially for those who were busy with work and those who had nothing better to do. Cough, for example, Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai was really idle. He didn't have anything to do. He was in control of the core power of his manor, and that was enough for him. The rest of the time was enough for him to enjoy life. Every day, in addition to sowing the seeds of life for his sisters, he had nothing serious to do. As the temperature rose, he would brew a pot of tea every day, sit under a big tree, play with his mobile phone, enjoy the breeze, drink the tea, and wait for lunch, dinner, and then the day would pass. The most terrible thing was swaying. Just like this, in a flash, Zhang Hai had returned to Winthrop for half a month. Today was the middle of June. On a Saturday, Zhang Hai was lying on his recliner as usual. The temperature rose very quickly in summer, but Zhang Hai was still very calm because it was very cool in his manner. Zhang, eat watermelon. At this moment, a series of messy footsteps sounded. Then, Zhang Hai saw Delina, Marian, and Taraga running towards him with a plate of cut watermelon in their hands. Slow down. Slow down. Don't be afraid of falling, my watermelon. Looking at the three girls running over, Zhang Hai also sat up. Looking at them, he couldn't help but shake his head and said with a distressed face. Zhang Hai grew a lot of fruits in his manor. He liked to eat fruits very much. In addition to the greenhouse, it could be said that fresh fruits were constantly available all year round. There were all kinds of berries, blueberries, strawberries, cranberries, cherries, watermelons, currants, apples, oranges, peaches, plums, kiwis, pomegranates, and so on. In January, they could eat currants, which were the frozen currants in China. In February, they could eat kiwis, pomegranates, etc. In March, they should be called pineapples. Unfortunately, they didn't grow in Zhonghai's manner, but they could be bought ready-made. In April, they could buy mangoes and mangosteens to eat. In May, they could eat currants and lychees, cherries in June, peaches and plums in July, watermelons in August, grapes in September, pears in October, apples in November, and oranges in December. All year round, Zhonghai would have plenty of food in his manor. Of course, the above-mentioned was only the time when the fruits were abundant. There would always be a difference between early and late ripening. For example, many watermelons were already ripe in June. Naturally, there would be more ripe in August. Zhonghai only planted 1 mu of watermelons. There were about 300 seedlings, but they were quite big. In Zhonghai's territory, there was no problem of insufficient nutrition. Therefore, each seedling could bear a bunch of watermelons. Moreover, they were very big and very sweet. Last year, many watermelons were too sweet and directly exploded because they were too sweet. This wasn't because of any injections. It was purely because of excessive nutrition. Zhonghai's watermelons, the watermelons near the rind, were even sweeter than the watermelons sold in the United States. If such a watermelon was sold, it could be imagined that it would be popular. However, Zhonghai didn't care too much about this business. Currently, the most expensive watermelon in the world was the black-skinned watermelon from Sichuan County, Japan. The bigger watermelons that could be bought in the supermarket were basically sold for about $300. This was already a well-deserved overlord price in the watermelon industry. However, how much did Zhonghai sell a pound of beef? Wasn't it? Therefore, he didn't care about this small amount of money. Not to mention, although his watermelons tasted good, they were very ordinary. 1 mu of land could produce about 1,000 watermelons. The average watermelon was between 4 and 6 pounds. They might not even have enough to eat, let alone sell them. Don't worry, I have grown up now. Hearing Zhonghai's words, Deliana, who was holding the watermelon, couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. She put the watermelon on the small table next to Zhonghai's teacup. Then she took a piece and ate it. The watermelon seeds were directly spat out into the grass in the distance, and the watermelon rind was also thrown there. This thing was very nutritious. Zhonghai's chickens liked to eat this, so it wouldn't be a waste to throw it there. Okay. Hearing Deliana's words, Zhonghai smiled and shook his head. When he first adopted this pair of twins, they were only 14 years old, but they were thin and small, just like 11 or 12 years old. Their bodies were almost completely undeveloped. Because they couldn't speak, they were quite vigilant and timid when they looked at others. But now, after raising them for 3 years, the situation of the 2 little girls was completely different. Their throats had been cured, and coupled with rich nutrition and abundant aura, their congenital deficiencies were forcibly made up for. Now, the 2 girls were about 1.72 meters tall. They were quite tall, had white and beautiful skin, and long blonde hair draped behind their heads. They looked very capable. Their bodies had slender muscle lines, and even had waistlines. Their thighs were straight and somewhat firm, but they were still very thin. Qijie and Azalina were experts in health and training. They had done a lot of research on how to shape a woman's perfect body. Therefore, looking at their bodies, Delina and Marion would have no problem going to Victoria's Secret. As for their appearance, it was unknown if it was because Zhonghai wanted them to look like this, but their appearance was different from traditional Americans. Their skin was very delicate, they had big eyes, small noses, and thin lips. If one were to say, they looked like a movie star Jessica Alba, but she had blonde hair and her skin was whiter than her. Even Selena Gomez had asked Zhonghai more than once if he wanted to let the twins debut. She was sure that if the twins debuted, they would inevitably cause a storm. However, the twins only liked to stay with Zhonghai. They didn't go anywhere except here. Although Zhonghai vaguely felt that the twins' feelings for him were not only gratitude, but also the feelings of a daughter to a father, but Zhonghai didn't say anything about it. They were still young, and when they grew up, they would discover the nature of a scumbag. Well, no one would call him a scumbag anymore. Zhang Hai sat up, picked up a piece of watermelon and ate it. No matter how many times he ate his watermelon, he still felt that it was delicious. 4 people and half a watermelon were finished in a short time. After Zhang Hai took out a tissue next to him and wiped it, he was about to lie down again, but before he could lie down, the 3 girls gathered around him. Zhang Hai, take us out to play tomorrow. Lying beside Zhang Hai, Marian blinked her big eyes and asked Zhang Hai, go out to play? You can go by yourself. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai looked at them with some doubts. What kind of path is this? No, you must take us out to play. Tomorrow is Children's Day. Parents must take us out to play. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Daliana said with a smile. Although they have never regarded Zhang Hai as their father, after all, Zhang Hai is their guardian by law, and the same is true for Taraga. Don't talk to me about those useless things. Children's Day is June 1st. It has long passed, and there is no Children's Day in the United States. Do you think it's my first day in the United States? Zhang Hai said indifferently after giving them a blank look. Indeed, it's not that Zhang Hai has never celebrated Children's Day. June 1st Children's Day is an international convention, but no one in the United States celebrates June 1st Children's Day. Well, to be exact, except for Huaxia, basically no country in the world celebrates June 1st Children's Day. Because it was originally a very sad holiday. The origin of this holiday was in June 1942, when Germany attacked Czech Republic and massacred a village called Lidice. All the men and babies over the age of 16 were killed, and only the women and 90 children survived and were sent to concentration camps. Later they won. In order to mourn this village and the world's dear who died in World War II, in November 1949, the International Democratic Women's Federation decided that June 1st would be International Children's Day. Therefore, almost no country in the world celebrates June 1st Children's Day, because it is a very sad day. Therefore, if you celebrate June 1st Children's Day abroad, it will be like September 18th in China, or some special commemorative days in Nandu. When the whole country is in mourning, if you go out to play firecrackers and celebrate, aren't you looking for a beating? Therefore, in foreign countries, no one celebrates June 1st Children's Day. When Zhang Hai first came, he was a little confused, but now he understands. TCH, who said June 1st Children's Day? We are talking about the second Sunday in June. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Taraga also patted Zhang Hai's leg and said somewhat reproachfully, Taraga is already on summer vacation. After a year of study, she can only say that it is passable. After all, she has only been exposed to formal learning for a year. There are more than 200 first-year students in the whole school, and she ranks in the 140th place. This is also under the condition that she handed in a blank paper for history. This is quite good. The history of Native Americans and Americans, she didn't set the classroom on fire, which is already giving face to Zhang Hai. The 6th Sunday? Hearing her words, Zhang Hai was stunned for a moment, then rolled his eyes and thought about it. There seems to be such a holiday. The origin of this holiday is quite famous in the United States. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.